Item 1A, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Item 1B, approval of agenda/items for discussion. Mr. Scott just approached me as I was walking in with an issue on the agenda. And so, before we go down this path, Mr. Scott, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I was reviewing the meeting minutes, and there's an incorrect motion on here, which I believe is going to affect tonight's agenda. So the Neola, when we voted on Neola last month, we did vote to pass 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, to pass 8 of the Neola policies. And we talked about postponing the rest, but we never actually made a motion to postpone those or had any action on them. So in the meeting minutes, where it shows that the motion included passing the 8 and postponing the rest, that is factually inaccurate. So I'm going to make a motion to make a modification to the agenda, and that would be to remove action item 2B from the agenda. And then when we get to the meeting minutes, I will make a motion to correct those to show the correct motion that involved the passing of 8 Neola policies, but not the postponement of the remainder. And it's my belief that the remainder of those will need to be reintroduced since we did not take action on them last month.
Second.
There's no motion on the table.
There is no?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to move that we approve the agenda with the exception of the removal of action item 2B.
For the February 17th, 2025 regular meeting, Mr. Scott?
Yes.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, you said that they're in the minutes, it says that policies were approved, and the motion also says that we would postpone. Oh, I see it now. Thank you.
Right. So the
second
part about postponing it was never in the motion made by Mr. Keller or seconded by myself. And I have timestamps from the recording if we want to cue it up. It's recording 3 at the 31-minute and 25-second mark is where Mr. Keller makes his motion.
Okay.
So there was some discussion at the table about the need to postpone them, but it was a pretty scattered discussion, and we never actually made a motion to do so.
Okay. I will take your word for it, certainly. I don't think we need to queue up. Does anyone wish to queue up the recording? Okay.
Sorry, are we officially discussing this motion then?
Well, so then anything that would be on discussion items, well, the motion's not.
Yeah.
Mr. Scott made a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item 2B for the February 17th, 2025 regular meeting. Where's my support, Mr. Gogoleski?
Yes, I second that.
Mr. Gogoleski, second it. So now, discussion, yes, please.
Okay. I guess one thing I was considering, I guess just sort of a general question regarding action item 2C, which was the agenda. We kind of have that as a, we're going to vote on it, talk about it, and then there's a secondary discussion 3B. So I guess depending on the motion from Mr. Scott, I would actually like to consider putting that agenda in as a discussion, 3A as well. So we kind of talk about sort of everything all at once, as opposed to talking about it as an action and then having a subsequent discussion on the exact same policy later, I would actually move to amend your motion, Mr. Scott, to also include 2C, moving to 3A.
So I think, and Greg, thank you for bringing that up. Obviously, you and I had a discussion. So we received a ton of feedback from November and December around people not knowing a lot of the discussion at the table. I think, Mr. Campbell, you even spoke about it last meeting, about we had no clue what you were truly voting on. Because there was discussion, but then there were so many modifications, I don't think that the public, it was very hard to follow. And if you go back and watch them a second time, it's very hard to follow despite being here and present. And so what I did in this, and perhaps this goes into this discussion item B as a new way of, not this exact way, but perhaps we identify a way, is to say, okay, let's vote on what we discussed, but if there's huge modifications, other than a comma here, an and there, an or there, let's introduce that as a discussion, even though we have to potentially modify twice, so that we can actually have the discussion on those modifications. Again, I'm open to what that looks like in the future, but that's what I did on this agenda so that we could separate the two. And so just for context for the rest of the crew.
Megan, just a suggestion as well, since Mr. Scott did clearly state that there was lots of conversation, just not a motion to postpone. Someone could make a motion to set aside board policy to create action items for those policies that were going to be action item tonight anyway. So you could make a motion to set aside board policy to make these action item tonight. If it gets seconded, then you can vote on that, and then they become action items.
And I think I need a refresher on how, we've got a motion on the table. We have a motion that's not seconded yet to amend that motion. And now there's discussion of bringing forth a third motion. And I
So we
need a
need to
refresher
deal-
on how this is compounding, and I'm not exactly sure what the right
So
process
the
is.
most recent motion on the table is Mr. Keller's motion to modify, to amend Mr. Scott's motion. So we need to deal with Mr. Keller's motion first.
I support Mr. Keller's motion.
Okay. I'm trying to write the motion down, excuse me for the pause. Motion by Mr. Keller, supported by Mr. Scott, to move item, to remove item 2C off of action items and maintain it on discussion items. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. On that motion, I'm going to take a roll call vote. Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman?
No,
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
No.
Mr. Campbell?
No.
And I'm a no, that motion does not pass. The motion currently on the table that we are now dealing with is Mr. Scott's original motion, not amended. Any further discussion on the non-amended motion by Mr. Scott, which was supported by Mr. Gogolewski?
So what needs to take place to keep that on? There was discussion, but no vote, no motion.
There would have to be a motion to set aside board policy and maintain items that are noted in item 2B for action.
Yeah, I certainly would not support setting aside policy in a case like this. I think it's fair to the community that we follow the policies that we pass, and there's zero urgency on these items. I think the proper thing to do is do them correctly by the book, make sure the minutes are correct, and that they're not going to be questioned later on. And I think taking a step to circumvent our own policies in order to pass new policies which have no immediate pressing concerns is a dangerous precedent to set. So I certainly would not support that type of action from the board.
Can I ask when the appropriate time to make a motion to set aside board policy would be?
Now, before we vote on this policy.
I make a motion to set aside board policy to keep items 2B on the agenda as presented.
I second.
Okay, you guys, I'm going to write this down, so apologize if I
This
pause.
this is what we're trying to avoid by making things, moving things around so much. I agree.
Okay, if I'm hearing correctly, I have a motion to amend Mr. Scott's original motion to maintain item 2B on the agenda as originally presented and set aside board policy. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes.
Yes.
So is there a specific policy that allows us to do that, Mr. Hughes?
No, that's just standard procedure. You're
We
allowed to do
can,
that.
yeah, we can,
It's on
we've,
years and years and years of doing this.
there's other policies that we've set aside as well.
Are we in discussion, Megan?
Yes, go ahead,
Okay.
I'm just writing. so
I didn't
you
want
can
to
Continue.
jump too soon if you're still working over there, so. I know for me personally, there are some, I kind of went through, again, these policies, and I know that some of them, again, since we'll be talking about, I think, 4 of them now in 3A, I would prefer, again, given there's some edits that I think that didn't get included, I would propose we continue upon or down the path of Mr. Scott and keep those as discussion items, just to try to keep it as clean as possible.
I'm happy they're on there in discussion items to talk about, but I know since the last meeting, there's work that's been done, and we've been looking into that to prepare for tonight. Like, I hear you, Mr. Scott, on that, but short of your point of the issue with the last meeting at the time mark you said, I think there's been preparation to move forward with these.
Any additional discussion on the motion presented by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman?
One other thing I want to add to, give some examples. So on conflict of interest, we met and talked about, when I say we, Mr. Hughes and I, we met and talked about 1130, 3110, 4110. I think everything that I pointed out on 3110 was incorporated, but on 1130, there's some material in section B that is still not in there. And, the only time we had the chance to catch that was when this packet was released, right? Because there was no previous opportunity to have a secondary conversation about some of the edits that were missing. So then also in 4110, in section 4, there's some strike-throughs that are missing, and then there's some additions that were missing. Again, this is all the same content that I shared a month ago, but it just, I think, got overlooked when the secondary edits were made. So I do think we want to kind of keep these in the discussion to keep it clean. And for me to be able to proceed voting in the affirmative, I'm going to want to see those changes made.
So you just asked to keep it in discussion. I don't think anyone's asking to remove from discussion.
But I thought the point of the motion that was on the table was to keep it as an action item, to overlook the bylaw or policy, to move it into the discussion.
No, it's to keep 2B as action items instead of removing
Exactly, so that
these.
would be not a discussion.
And that the one that you're bringing forward is the one that is not, 6110, 6111, 6325, or 0166.
It's not any of those. So that's 1130, had some additional changes that I think needed to be made. I have, I had some questions on 5340 that didn't get incorporated. I think everything that I mentioned for 6110, 6111, and 6325, we have already as 3A. Those would be opportunities to discuss that. But again, for these other policies, we can discuss them as actions, but I think it will be harder to track what changes are necessary if we don't do it as a discussion.
I think we're going down the same road that happened in November, December, January's meetings, right? About, I think the way to conduct business is to vote on the policies we have in front of us, minus maybe a comma, grammatical error, misspelling. And then anything that you want to revise further should be brought as a discussion item.
Greg, I was under the impression that you, Matt, had revised on all your grammatical errors, but then took your additions separately. Like you
Yeah,
had
so the
additions to
addition.
the additions.
Okay, so just to be clear, the additions are separate per
Yeah.
3A. No questions there. But some of the other things that were just typographical, clerical, that got overlooked in today's packet are still here. So we're voting on things that I summarized to the team a month ago, but are still,
And those are
Not-
just grammatical changes?
well, I mean, to me, it's beyond grammatical, right? It's missing some language that's in the other policies.
And there was also direction 2 times during that conversation from President Glaybach to have Mr. Hughes reach out to the Neola rep and get some explanations on several of those policies. And to date, I have not received any explanations from Mr. Hughes or the Neola rep.
Okay, I'm going to say I disagree with that, and here's why. This is bothering me. I sat for an hour and a half with Mr. Keller, went through every one of these policies, wrote down every one of the changes he wanted me to make. He pointed them out. There were 3 policies he wanted to make significant changes to, at least adding sentences and whatnot, and my recommendation would those be discussion items. If there's small grammaticals, we can take care of that through policy on typographical minor changes, or you can bring that policy back at discussion item next time and say, this was a big no-no on that one. We passed it, but we need to change it. So I disagree. I did exactly what I was asked to do. I sat with Mr. Keller for an hour and a half, and I made sure Renee had all the changes.
And did you get with Pat from Neola and get the explanations on the items that President Glaybach requested at last month's meeting?
The biggest one that I was asked to check into was the $5,000 versus $10,000. When I met with Mr. Keller, I asked Rachel to come in. Rachel was able to clarify it. Mr. Keller said he was good with that. So that's what we did.
There were 2 specific requests from President Glaybach at last month's meeting regarding the Neola rep. One was that some explanation of why the verbiage is different between the various conflict of interest statements. And the second was why or if we aren't revising the conflict of interest bylaw. And then we did get some communication that the information shared at last month's meeting was incorrect, inaccurate as far as Neola's ability to help us with our bylaws, but never got any follow-up on what Neola or Pat's recommendation was to handle that bylaw change.
So I did talk, Renee talked with Pat. He said that the bylaw is fine the way it's written for that particular number, so don't worry about it. He said we didn't recommend any changes there. The other ones, he indicated that we could do what we needed to do to make, if we felt more comfortable with them being similar. So we sat with Mr. Keller and made them similar. So if I didn't get that information to you, I thought I did a whole email after I met with Keller on what transpired in that conversation. So if I didn't give you exactly what you're looking for, I certainly meant to.
Well, I certainly don't see the need to rush these through and break our own policies simply to say we got it done, especially when there's still questions at hand. So as I said, I certainly could not support passing these this evening in their current form and the way they've gotten to the table. I think the fair thing to do for the public, for our constituents, for our students, is going to be to remove them from the agenda. And if someone would like to reintroduce them tonight, that's absolutely fine. But to just pretend that the rules don't exist so that we can continue march on with our agenda when there is absolutely no need, no hurry, I think is irresponsible. So I will stand by my request to remove that from the action item, and I certainly will not support any of these policies tonight in their current form.
All right. Again, motion on the table to maintain item 2B, to amend Mr. Scott's original motion and to actually maintain item 2B on the agenda as originally presented. Any further discussion? One last check. Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Gogolewski?
No.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, that motion passes. Moving forward, we are now on item 1B. We are, the motion has been amended, so Mr. Scott's original motion, supported by Mr. Gogolewski, has been amended to maintain item 2B on action items. Hearing any discussion? Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Gogolewski?
No.
Mrs. Coleman?
I'm sorry, I have to clarify. Now we're just simply voting on item 1B as it is on the agenda.
Yes, because it was amended.
Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure. Then I'm a yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 1C, consent agenda.
So to modify the minutes, do we need to remove them from the consent agenda? Is that the proper action?
You just actually have to request to take it separately.
I'm going to request to remove, to address the minutes separately, please.
Okay, you want to go ahead and talk about that, and then we can move forward with the approval of the minutes after you talk about modifications.
So on the minutes where it's new and revised policies, the second motion reads, motion by Keller, supported by Scott, to amend the agenda item and approve policies 6112, 6550, 7450, 7455, 3120.08, 5330.02, 5500, and 7540.09 as presented. And then I request that we strike and postpone the approval of number 1130, 3110, 4110, 6110, 6111, 6114, 6325, 7310, 5340, and 8321.
Okay, to clarify the changes that you're requesting, under new and revised policies, in the second paragraph, you would like to strike the last portion of the first sentence, which indicates postpone the approval, and then it lists 1130, 3110, 4110, 6110, so on.
Yes.
Any questions on that striking?
Would this move to 2F? Is that what the new structure would look like for the agenda?
No, I think we,
Somebody
it
would
now.
have to make a motion to modify the agenda further, and a modification
Well, no,
after it's been passed.
But once you pull it out of the consent agenda, where does it go?
What do you
just
mean?
vote on it now.
No, we would vote on the minutes with the modifications.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So do I have a motion to pass the minutes, but as amended with the strikeout under new and revised policies?
So moved.
I'm sorry?
So moved.
Okay. Moved to pass the minutes as amended by Mr. Scott. Do I have support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Scott, supported by Mr. Keller. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Gogolewski. Or I'm sorry, Mr. Scott.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Mr. Gogolewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman.
yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, that motion passes. We now have to take payment of invoice and approval of board member expenses separately, so please move forward with those motions.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer, approves the financial report as of January 31st, 2025, and the payment of invoices totaling $2,508,910.45, and payroll obligations totaling $5,183,952.59.
Support.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman. Any discussion on payment of invoices? Hearing none. Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item C3, 1C3, sorry.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer, approves the board members' expense report for reimbursement as presented.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. All three items have passed on 1C for those following along. Item 1D, we're going to move into the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. First up tonight, I'm going to change a little bit of order here because Scott Usher's out of here, so I told him I'd get him on first. We have a brief technology update from Scott. Scott, we have the legacy up here, so you're gonna have to do what you have to do.
I've done that before.
Just don't lose her.
She's not lost. Hi, everybody. Okay.
See you, Scott.
Thank you very much. It's good to be seen. All right, so this is just a brief technology update. Let everybody know what we did last year, last summer, and kind of where we're at technology work order-wise and what we're planning to do this coming summer. Okay, so first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about our profile, the district's profile with regard to technology. Of course, we have 9 buildings, 329 classrooms, labs, and instructional spaces. And we have about 1,950 computers. We have 75 copiers/printers that are stationed throughout the district. We have interactive technology in every single classroom, including document cameras, interactive flat panels. They're commonly referred to as smart boards. They're not actually smart boards. They're New Line interactive flat panels. And we have some Clever Touch panels and a couple of other brands as well. They all function the same, and there are about 320 of them district-wide. We have our classroom sound systems in the K through 8 buildings, sorry. We have microphones that the teachers wear to amplify their voices, and then speakers somewhere in the classroom. Here at this building, Legacy, and at the high school, we have speakers. We don't have the microphones in the classrooms. Those teachers, when asked about that, indicated that they did not need nor want those on the overall basis. So we just put speakers in those classrooms. We have 744 phones throughout the district, including a voicemail system, which if a voicemail is left, it goes to a person's email so they can hear it from anywhere they are on their email system. We have 840 wireless access points located throughout the district, keeping our Chromebooks, which are all wirelessly connected, able to communicate with the network. Card access system, we have currently 898 badges that have been printed and handed out with the intelligence in it that allows access to our buildings for all of our various different employees. That includes some elevator fobs, a lot of elevator fobs for the high school for students who are on crutches or in need of using the elevators to get from level to level in that building. We have some fobs that are some badges that we have for our elementary school substitute teachers that they can use when they go out to playground to do recess to allow the children back in. So those are part of the 898. We have 293 cameras located throughout the district in all of our various different buildings. We have digital signage. There's digital signage here at the front of our building here when you walk into this building, and each of the buildings has digital signage. And there are 22 of those throughout the district. We have paging systems, of course, to communicate in our buildings. We have a lot of network devices and devices on our network, including HVAC, our vape detection. Those things are all sitting and running on our network that we, the technology department, have to take care of. We have interconnectivity, fiber between all of our buildings, and then fiber that runs to the LESA that is shared fiber, not just Hartland's, but we share that with the county as well. So we have a partnership through the county, which is governed through the LESA. We have a shared 10 gigabit connection of internet connection that we share through the LESA for all of our buildings to connect to, that is shared with all the other districts in the county. Okay, so that one 10 gig connection is shared with all the other districts in the county. There's an advantage to that because the main firewall that sits at the LESA campus is large enough and big enough to kind of take care of an umbrella all of us. We have also internal firewalls here at the district level that also help keep us protected from anybody getting in out from the outside. We average about 700 megabits of bandwidth throughout the day. That's an average. We, of course, peak and spike at times well above that, sometimes in the upwards, in the range of about 3 gigabits. So at times, we really have a lot of data that travels through, and then it shrinks down again, and we average about 700 to 800 megabits of bandwidth throughout the day. That's a decent amount, and we do share that, like I said, with all the other districts in the county. And if that connection goes down, which it has for us in the past, we have a backup 10 gig connection that is our own that we use. And that 10 gig connection we have switched over to in the past, and we have the ability to switch over to that. That goes directly to our internet service provider, Wayne County RESA. All right? So we have a backup there in case we need it, which, again, like I've said, we've had. About 3 years ago, I think it was, we went down. We had our fiber down for a couple of days. Down in Brighton, there was a big old cut right there across the little pond, and the fiber guys had to use canoes and break the ice and get out there, and they were literally up there in these canoes and boats. It was just quite the scene when they had to fix that. So it's important for us. We would have been down for a couple days, and that would have been during our WEDA testing and some other things that were going on. Not good time to have our internet connection go down. So that backup connection, I've lobbied to maintain for all these years, and I think it's been a very helpful thing for us. So
I have a quick question,
Yes.
Scott. All of this is great stuff. Wonderful technology that we have available. How do we do with making sure that people are trained and supported to use all this stuff?
So there's two different sides to that, right? There are the end users that are using it on a daily basis, and there's also the technology staff that have to know how to make it all work, okay? So we, on the technology side of things, we learn ourselves. We have a lot of years of experience on our side that enables us to be able to put all these things together. We also do have the ability and have at times gone out to some service providers and had them come in to help us with things, okay? So that's on our side. We do a lot of learning on our own though, and we figure a lot of things out. On the end user side of things, we've done a lot of training in the past. And our end users, every time we introduce something new, like the interactive flat panels a couple of years ago, we did quite a bit of training on that for all of our staff members.
And we have probably that type of training available online somewhere where people can access it and reference it, or?
We sure do. There's a technology help desk page that people can go to, and there are some videos as well as some white paper step-by-step instruction guides, quite a lot of them actually, that would help a new teacher, for example, that comes in, learn how to use those various different types of technologies that are in the classroom, or if they're into an office space or a secretarial position or something like that. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we train on an as-needed basis, normally when we put a new technology in. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. So who are we? I keep talking about we, the technology team. This is your technology team. And I've got it listed there from the left to the right on your screen with the folks that are, except for the last three guys there, with the folks that are in order pretty much of our years of service. So myself, the technology director, then we have Jen Grabowski, who works in Dave's department. She's in curriculum, but she's also our help desk person, and she answers the phone when things go wrong. And she's constantly watching our work orders and kind of helping us to make sure that we are on task and seeing work orders that come in. Network administration and computer hardware support, we've got David Allward, who's been here for a number of years, about 15 or so. Jason Watkins and Cameron Montney, who've been here several years. We've got Stacy Moats as our director of data systems. Stacy's been with us, I think, since 2015, 2014, something like that. She's been here quite a long time and gone through a number of different roles in the district, and now is our director of data systems. Absolutely fantastic that she has the knowledge that she has for both our online testing, our Illuminate, our online testing software, as well as our MyStar software for our student database software. Network engineer, we do see Dave every once in a while, although he's not here as often. He is a LESA employee, and he is a shared employee. We share him with Brighton, Fowlerville, LESA. Hartland obviously is in that, and I think now Howell and Pinckney are starting to pick up some hours with him as well. So we do have him. He's always available if we call him. We have two systems engineers that work with us, Luke Johnson and Ryan Fox, who work with LESA as well, and we share them as well with Brighton, Fowlerville, LESA, and sometimes Howell and sometimes Pinckney when they need them down there. So that is your entire technology team. Well, we've had this collaboration with LESA for, gosh, Mr. Hughes, I think, what, 10, 12 years, I think. We've been working with them and had somebody from LESA here at Hartland to help us with some of those, some of that network engineer kind of things that we don't have necessarily the skill on staff to deal with. A lot of the guys, Jason and Cameron and Dave, they have a lot of those skills, but it's always nice to have that person that you can go to bring in that has that additional knowledge. And quite frankly, it's been very advantageous as well to have those folks, those LESA folks, be at the different districts throughout the county and experience the different things so they could bring ideas to us and help to streamline our processes as well. So all in all, we have a total of 96 years of experience with those folks supporting technology and education. That's supporting technology and education. That's a lot of years of experience for that group of folks right there. I'm really glad that all of those folks are on this staff. I think it allows us to do the kinds of things we need to do to support each of our end users, whether that be through training or whether that be through break fix, something's not working right, or whether that be through, hey, there's this technology that we need to start implementing, let's figure out how to do it. 96 years of total experience. So that's the list. That's kind of the, we call this our technology staff responsibilities flowchart. And this gives an idea of the types of things that each of those people do in the district. And so this is kind of like a mini job description. It hits the main topics for each of us. When we're supporting technology, one of the biggest things, or the biggest thing in the culture of our department is always, we do this in what's best interest of the students and the teachers, the parents, and the community at Hartland. And we've always had that belief, we've always felt that, and that's the direction we've always gone. So our technology work order system is in place. Ways to get tech help. We can, the best way to do it is to submit a work order electronically. Teachers or end users can call the help desk to get some help. They can email or call a specific person in the technology department, and we will answer and we will help anybody. But we always purport that the best thing and the easiest way for all of us to maintain the highest level of efficiency is to make sure that a work order is put into the system, and we'll get to those folks as soon as we possibly can. On the right-hand side of the graph, you'll see that it says technology work orders, and you'll see last year's total number of work orders open and closed compared to this year's total number of work orders open and closed up to today. That's up to this morning at about 9:30 when I pulled that data. And then you can see the data there. The little blue graph states the total number of work orders closed, while the yellow is numbers of work orders opened in the months from July of 24 through today's date, February of 25. You can see a couple of those dates or a couple of those months we have scales that tip one way or the other. The one that's mostly interesting to me is September, when our teachers come back. We have a lot of new employees. To Mr. Gogolewski's comment about training, well, a lot of those folks need some hand-holding on that when we come back, and we have things that aren't necessarily working perfectly. So we go and spend some time with those folks, and to your point from earlier, not only do we conduct training globally or in a classroom-style fashion, we do a lot of training one-on-one while we talk to folks. As you can see in that September, we had more work orders open than we actually were able to close because it's just a real busy month for us. Okay. Last summer in 2024, these are the things that we did. We replaced computer hardware at the high school. We also installed Windows 11 on all of the computers at Hartland High School. We did that for a couple of different reasons, not the least of which is in preparation for this year and kind of as a test pilot or test group to install Windows 11 on and start working with it and have our teachers and our staff start to work on it, because in October of 2025, Windows will eliminate support of Windows 10 altogether, and in order to obtain updates and make your software the most secure possible, which we like to have it here at Hartland, we have to update to Windows 11. So we did install Windows 11 on all the systems at the high school last summer as kind of our test group. Since they were brand new computers, it just made sense to us. We installed the new card access system last summer. We have more secure cards. We issued cards to all of those almost 900 staff members that you saw from earlier. That was a big project over the summer. We also replaced our firewall and our content filter. That graphic up there it says web page blocked. That's the block page that a student or a staff member would see if there's a site that you're not supposed to go to. So we did that last summer as well. That was another really big project, which went swimmingly well, I have to say. We added Chromebook carts to the high school out of the 2020 bond. And by the way, those new computers out of from HHS were also purchased out of the 2020 bond. And then annually, we have a bunch of things at the bottom there where no matter what year it is, we still have to add new staff and student users into Google, into Active Directory, so they have access to computers. We always implement server and software upgrades throughout the summer as well. We re-image all of our computers district-wide, well, most of our computers district-wide, or we update them in place in some cases. And then we conduct our annual summer recycle project, and you can see there's a bunch of computers that are sitting there representing what that pile looked like for recycle. And none of those machines were worth hardly anything nor functional anymore because we use all of our computers until we can't really use them any longer. For 2025, our projects include replacing the computers here at this building. The machines here at this building are currently 7 years old, will be 8 years old coming up. So we need to make sure we get those replaced. A 7-year-old computer is definitely a machine in a production enterprise environment that needs to start to be looking at getting replaced. So we're going to be doing that this summer. That's out of the 2020 bond. We're going to replace computers in the HMS Collaboration Lab that we haven't done yet, but we're going to get that done this summer as well. We're going to upgrade all of our computers in the district to Windows 11. Everything that's left out there except for this building is capable of running Windows 11, and we're going to update that or upgrade those. so that they are ready to roll when October of 2025 comes around. We're going to perform our annual summer network and server maintenance and update our servers and things like that, collect the old equipment, and do our recycling project. We're going to update on all of our district new line panels. Our new line panels that are the interactive flat panels like that one over there that are in all of our classrooms are in need of an update. Unfortunately, even though they're only a couple of years old, they can't any longer update over the internet. Like, you push Windows Update on your computer. Unfortunately, we have to take a thumb drive to every single one of those panels and update them by hand. So we're going to do that over the summer so we're not interfering with folks. We're going to do our annual rollover of students in MyStar, Google, Active Directory, and we're going to conduct our annual staff adds, adds, removes, and changes. That is what we're going to do.
I have a quick question for you, Scott.
Yes.
Are we doing anything, or do we need to be doing anything differently to prepare for kind of what's to come with AI and artificial intelligence? I think there's good and bad out there, and I think we're starting to see that. But is there anything that your team needs to prepare for that a little bit differently?
We are talking about it. We always talk. We've been talking about it. And through the curriculum department, Mr. Minsker and I are participating in and have participated in an AI task force at the LESA. So we're talking about what we're going to need to be able to continue to do to support our end users, to make sure that our equipment is ready for that in tip-top shape and ready to roll.
We've also had a professional come in and work with
Right.
some of our staff, our high school and middle school, I believe. I think middle school, right?
Correct.
And what we'll get from the teachers as they start experimenting with this is what their needs are as well.
Well, I also wonder even if there's, some type of advocacy that has to occur at the state or federal level or whatever level, because a lot of this requires a ton of energy, a ton of data. And so do we expect our energy bills to skyrocket, or is, the government, whether that's state, local, whoever, are they going to offer some offset of grant funding to support that? I know you don't have that answer today.
Not.
But just thinking out loud about, some of the things that are coming down the pipe.
You're welcome. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your evening. Thank you, sir.
While you're logging off, do you want to give a shameless plug to the other job that you do for the district?
Which one?
Just pick one. Good answer. Mamma Mia's coming up.
Oh, yes. Mamma Mia is coming up in April. Tickets aren't on sale yet, but they will be in the next couple of weeks, both on sale, and Mamma Mia will be happening.
So Scott,
High
I don't know,
School.
your days are what normally?
What's that?
18, 20 hours long?
No, not that bad. Not that bad. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Next, we have Nicole Conley, principal for our Legacy Alternative Ed program, as well as our HVAC, Hartland Virtual Academy, not air conditioning units. But Nicole, thank you for being here tonight. And we like to refer to Legacy as our Legacy High School. So when I say alternative, I really should say high school all the time.
Well, good evening, Board. I'm Nicole Conley. As you said, I'm the principal of Legacy High School and Hartland Virtual Academy. And tonight, I'm here to celebrate our school's endeavors. And I'm going to do it by highlighting in a day in the life of presentation. To begin, students in all 3 of our high schools and 2 middle schools study from the Michigan Merit Curriculum. This means walking through our classes, you will see students reading literature, writing essays, performing experiments and playing sports, testing theories, and studying algebra and geometry, just to name a few of their studies. And more often than not, you will see the finesse of highly dedicated and innovative educators as they individualize instruction and find ways to make lessons hands-on, which is a preferred learning style for most of our students. You could also see many alternative education students during their school days on various campuses throughout Livingston County as they study in the many career and trade courses that our shared time programs offer. In addition, alternative ed students are in college classes as dual enrolled high school students. After school, you could catch some of those students in the plays that we were just talking about, as they're rehearsing for the fall show or the upcoming Mamma Mia spring musical, because our thespians captivate. Our artists inspire. Our musicians and singers mesmerize. And our athletes have grit. You could easily find a Legacy or HBA student on the fields, courts, sidelines, and in the pool throughout Hartland athletics, doing their part to bring home championship titles for HCS, just like our esports team did with their Legacy member. As many of you know, both Legacy and HBA are located in this building. Essentially, we are in the heart of Hartland. And we love sharing the HCSC building with the 17+ organizations that are here because it provides amazing opportunities to network, volunteer, and intern. But beyond all that, it allows us to practice two fundamental principles all HCS believes in: connections and community matter. So you will see our leadership as we present at the state level in Lansing or accept awards from Senator Tice. And you will see our connectedness with the community when we partner with the fire department, volunteer with the preschool, or enjoy time with the senior center. Because we are beyond thankful for our opportunities and our school family. We often say we offer big district options with a small school family feel. Our staff is a synergetic team of collaborative colleagues that have a shared passion, commitment, and inventive spirit that leave lasting impacts on student learning and growth. They welcome all students, no matter where they are on their educational journey. And we invite everyone who wishes to wear our blue and gold with pride, because above all else, we are all Eagles. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight.
Nicole, quick question. Is there any kind of program that perhaps there's been an interest in by students, a request for, that maybe we're not capturing right now, and maybe we need a little bit more effort in developing something, like whether it's a technical type of career vocational thing or one of those?
Specifically at Legacy or district-wide?
Well, Legacy too, specifically Legacy right now. If there's anything that maybe, you know, some of the students have requested that maybe we don't have. In other words, is there enough resources for you that, you know, we could maybe help provide or what have you?
Similar to all buildings, we balance that student offerings and staff with district-wide needs, right? So where we benefit from is the collaborative partnership that we have with Main Campus. So students that go to Legacy or HVA can still dip into those resources so openly. We don't have, for example, an art class here. However, if one of my students is very passionate about that, we can enroll in a Main Campus class, and they can take much all of their here and then go to Main Campus for an elective.
Gotcha.
So we do, that's how we can share with those, you know, trade programs and elective courses.
Shared resources, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, for sharing. I don't think I've ever cried at a board meeting. I was close. So thank you. I mean, the pride that you have in your students and staff just shines through. So
They're amazing people.
Thank you.
I'm lucky.
We have to figure out how to get that piece of Eagle artwork and like display it somewhere that has a lot of, you know, traffic in our district. That would be awesome. Blow it up, maybe. It can go right here. We have a
Yeah.
gentleman that tells us all the time.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nicole.
Thank you.
All right.
Can I leave this open? Okay, perfect.
Next, the strategic plan. I did let the board know that our MASB representative is waiting for me to sign the strategic plan process. There was, I think, Mr. Scott, you had indicated that you were hoping to have a selection of individuals to choose from as a board. However, that can be done, but it would be in the fall. I think I shared that with you all. So that delays the strategic plan process until the fall. So right now, they have the individual that I shared the name with you, shared some information with you. They're waiting for me to sign before they assign him to somebody else, and I told them by tomorrow I would know if there's any consternation on the board table. And so unless there's consternation with me going ahead and getting with them and signing up with that, I'll do that tomorrow. And so I just wanted to make sure the board knew what I was doing, and I think you've already passed a resolution to move forward. It's just a matter of, having a multitude of selections of people to do it or who they have available.
And just to your point, Mr. Hughes, and just for those listening, the motion was passed, I believe, in August, and that general agreement for MASB was in that packet. I think for the board, are we comfortable with the individual that he had selected? Or I know there was some discussion around individuals that we would rather not necessarily have coming into the district. If that individual is not one of them. For those of you that work with consulting firms, I know some of you on the board do. I've never been able to necessarily handpick my consultant. There's usually an end of deliverables. But it would just be a matter of timing as well. I know from a board standpoint, trying to get the strategic plan together before 2020, the 25-26 school year would be optimal, but certainly want to make sure everyone's comfortable with it. We don't need to vote on it, but want to make sure everyone is comfortable with that individual.
So I'm assuming, unless I heard tonight, whoa, break the brakes, I'm going to go forward and we'll sign the contract and we'll get this started. All right.
Mr. Scott, I am intentionally leaving the individual's name
Yeah,
out
no,
of
that's
my-
fine. I mean,
I just want to make sure he's not on your,
he was not
list?
on the list of people I did not want to be involved with strategic planning, because I don't believe he's a MASB employee. I think he's a contractor.
the consultant.
And given the timeline, I certainly think it's more important to start now than wait. And I think even if we wait, it might be, who knows who we're getting. So, yeah.
Okay.
It's-
Okay. Thank you. And lastly, I just wanted to thank Dave and Kate and the HEA. They've been engaging in conversations around setting the calendar for next year. And so we do have a calendar that has been negotiated and ratified by the HEA. Dave, will you talk about our start date and what that's going to look like? And then there'll be more to come after this.
Yep, absolutely. I can speak for Kate. I appreciate the HEA and the conversations that we had, the collaborative conversations. It's always a good talk about what our school year is going to look like, what's best for students and their learning. The first day of school for students will be August 18th. It'll be a half day for students in K-6 and a full day for students in 7-12. And it's a little bit later start date. So it's by about 5 days later, and we still get out before June. So it worked out pretty good. Any questions on the calendar?
When will the broader calendar will come out?
As soon as we get the calendar, Renee's got to do some formatting and whatnot, and then we'll get that out as soon as we can. Okay? And I will put the start date in my my weekly update this week, so parents at least know what the start date is.
Okay,
So ends the superintendent's report.
thank you. Moving on to item 1E, call to the public. This is just a reminder that speakers are asked to express themselves in a civil manner with due respect for the dignity and privacy of others who may be affected by your comments. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. I will wave the yellow folder when you have 30 seconds left. First up, we have Larry Parsons.
Good evening, everybody. I missed last month's meeting, so Happy New Year belated. There's beautiful weather out there, isn't it? So there's been a lot going on in the past few months, and what I want to talk about tonight is all the DEI stuff that's been going on. But first, I want to share something with you. This is one of my favorite pictures. We keep this on my wall at home. That's one of my favorite people in the world. And he signed some executive orders. And he's actually making our lives easier because we can stop boys and girls sports, and we can stop racist DEI programs. I have a picture, a screenshot on my phone from the Great Lakes Equity Center. Their website has been shut down. I believe you're contracted with them. Maybe we can make that ridiculous contract go away. But I understand that there's some, let's call it animosity. There's rumors going around the community. So I don't know whether the rumors are true, but I understand that there's some board members that just want to reverse a whole bunch of stuff that got done in December, and I would caution against that. I think that's a mistake. Plenty of time ahead of you to work things out and get this done properly. We're all adults. We can work together. There's no scores to settle here. It's all about the kids and what's best for the kids. And crazy, wacky policies are not good for kids. Got to keep the girls safe in their bathrooms, safe in sports. It's not fair to put a young lady up against a guy in a skirt in a swimming pool or on a football team, on a soccer team. You have women that are getting broken noses playing soccer with a guy that wears a dress. We have to protect our ladies. We love them. They're our daughters. They're our wives. They're our mothers. Sisters. You know the drill. So I'm going to ask the school board to pass reasonable legislation, worry less about vendettas, about doing the right thing, so I don't have to come to school board meetings, so I can stay at home, so I can spend time with my granddaughter, maybe my grandsons, or maybe just go fishing. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Next up, we have Barbara Tonkovich.
Thank you. Now that I'm back from Florida for 4 months, it was long. Some of the comments that were just made tonight about things coming down the pike, the district profile, and I can't read my writing. The important thing is about what is best for the kids, as Larry was mentioning. How to teach children right from wrong, not by man's wisdom, but it's by God's. Because you have to have some type of truth. And it's got to be absolute truth. And all of us know that we're just thinking what our truth is. There is truth. It's God's truth. We are currently concerned with worldly lessons, but leaving undone the moral compass of the personality and character of children. That's why I would like to, I didn't put my number down, but I probably should give it to you, Megan. I would like to know how we can go about getting the 10 Commandments back in all of our schools. We had it through the 60s. Well, not through the whole 60s, but we did have it in schools. That would take care of a lot of the issues going on, the racial issues, the confusion with gender issues. It's not a religious thing. It's a God thing. There's a big difference. Religion can be Hindu or Muslim or whatever, but the thing is, we need the truth from what God says, and it's spelled out in His Word. And I have offered through the years that I've been coming here to freely teach, come in, speak to kids who have any questions about what's in the Bible, what's it about? Because that's what's happened to this country and to this community. So that's what I want to leave you with. Thank you.
John C.
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, I'll get it from you after.
Good evening. Good evening, Board. I left a little folder on all the board members' desks. And I had, I think, a pretty successful 3 elected terms in Brighton as a trustee, but these are pretty basic things, and if you can believe it, they're MASB, and I don't always support MASB, but it talks about board member responsibilities. If you flip to the second page, it says, under Michigan law, the board is responsible to educate students, provide for safety and welfare of students, which we all support, obviously, period, 100%. Expenditure, school receipts, I'm skipping down a little bit. And then down in the next paragraph down, it says, setting the curricula and courses taught in schools. Often board members haven't been included in this. The policy programs are brought to them and say, hey, you approve it or not, but they really haven't generated a lot. But under state law, we're supposed to be involved in that. Talking about taxes, we're aware of that. Talks about negotiations, that's another issue. Negotiating with employees, the unions, salaries, conditions of employment. And board members are often left out of all of that. There's typically someone that does it for you. Contracts are brought to you, and then, hey, we're going to approve it or we're not going to approve it. Well, this is under Michigan law. Now, technically, that means board members are obligated to be involved in this. Now, management will tell us differently some days. And then page 2 of the packet is the MCLs on this, and it's revised school code. It's been around a long time. It's pretty straightforward. Not fun reading, really, but it's just a couple pages. I don't need to review that, but that's really encapsulated in what this MASB page that I just read off of. And in the packet 3 in your little folder is something a little bit different. I stumbled across this. This is electing your employer. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. This is provided to the union hierarchy throughout each school district in our state, from what I understand. This particular one is MEA, and it was provided to our district locally. And it talks about how the union goes about electing school board members. I think it's really important, and it should be read very closely. Thank you. And if you're one of the people that they elected, remember the laws that you have to uphold. So thank you for your time tonight.
Aaron McKenna.
Hello, my name is Erin McKenna. I do have one question I'm hoping you guys can answer. I noticed on the agenda for the opt-in, it says rescinded across it. What does that, what do you mean rescinded? Is anyone able to answer it? Nope, okay, so, okay, All right, so it's being moved to action item. All right, well, I wanted to just give, as a parent in the school district, first off, I think that this program will be valuable, and I hope that it can continue to move forward, and I hope rescinding doesn't mean the program is going to be rescinded, and that the opt-in part, I would encourage it to be moved to opting out versus opting in. Parents that don't want to have their children participate in that and are passionate about that are going to reach out and opt out. And I think it'd just be better for our community and better for the students if it remained as a, you have to opt your child out. The only other thing I wanted to bring up for tonight was during, under policy 6110 for grant funds, there is a discussion point to add in a fifth component related to promotion of race-based sorry, I can't talk tonight, out on where we can't use our federal funds, the grants. This is currently not a restriction in Title 20 USC 7906. However, there is a new provision related to weapons that should be reviewed for adding it and making it align with law. So if you pull up the policy, there is no such thing related to race-based curriculum and prohibiting it, but there is a very long blurb related to weapons that should be looked at. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1F, committee and building reports. Mr. Keller, I'm going to start with you. It's okay. I can start over here with Mr. Scott. You good?
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Mr. Gobolewski?
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. I had the pleasure of speaking with Carol Hayes last week regarding Hartland Community Ed and some of the programs that they have going on there. And I thought I knew a lot about community ed, and she proved me wrong. I was really pleased to find out some of the additional things that they do, that they're responsible for. One of the biggest ones that I did not realize is that we have a Hartland Early Learning Center. It's at the 51 building, and it's childcare for children ages 6 weeks to 4 years old. We have a preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds just doing this during the school year, latchkey for kindergarten, summer camp for kindergarten. But one thing that really blew me away is that it's open year-round. I always assumed that it was open just during the normal school year, and it's not. And I think that's a great offering to the community, to especially for mothers that maybe have to work a job or because a family has obligations with different shifts and such. I really think it's a great program. That's something that we could really help promote a little bit. It really is. And then thinking about a revenue stream coming in, we have room rentals that the community ed is in charge of. They schedule all the rentals and the events in the district. Lots of good stuff. We have long-term rentals, including Livingston Gem and Mineral, Lisa preschool classrooms, all kinds of stuff. We have Ohana Karate, Hartland Chamber, Courtesy Driving School. So all of this adds to the overall bottom line of the district, and they do a good job of maintaining that and handling that. So I want to give them a big thumbs up for doing that. And then, of course, all of the other programs that they offer, the biggest one that you can really keep your eye out for, and I know that I've been guilty of this sometimes, I get the community life paper, and to me, it just looks like another paper coming to my house, and I'm like, I'm going to toss it. But if you open it up, there's a good chance you're going to find a picture of your kid. There's a good chance you're going to find some great events that are going on in all the schools, lots of good information. And that comes out 10 months out of the year. And I'll tell you what, if you're a small business, if you're looking to advertise, that's a great thing to do. It's a great paper because it gets out in front of parents. So keep your eye open for that. But Carol was very eager to brag about her staff and the programs that she offers, and I left being just blown away by some of the things that they do outside of what you normally think. So with that, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Gogoleski. Mrs. Coleman?
Thank you. I don't have too much specific to report this time, but I have been able to get to visit the team at Creekside, particularly to spend some time with Mrs. Gunn. I was there in January and then again already in February. I've been around since our last board meeting, and I've got another meeting set up with Mrs. Hotham there. Obviously, with the DEI committee, we've had a couple of Zoom meetings. I missed the in-person meeting that we had, but we did meet a few times for that, and the senior center will meet again at the beginning of March. And I just wanted to do this kind of a personal shout out, but to the high school counselors and all the other support staff there, thank you for all you do this time of year with not only getting our high school students scheduled for next year, but also the middle school students. I've gotten questions from a couple of middle school parents with their first time doing it, thinking they assume that I must know everything because I have 4 kids that I've helped schedule, but I know virtually nothing. So thank you for the patience and for answering all the questions to everybody there at the high school. The team does a great job there. That's it.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Did I just hear that there have been DEI meetings, committee meetings?
I think they had trips to
Yeah, we
Great
had
Lakes.
the team went to Indy, and then we met on Zoom with our contact from
Didn't
Indy.
we agree that all committee meetings were going to be open?
There are 2 representatives for the Great Lakes Initiative, so Mr. Gogoleski and
Right.
Mrs. Coleman.
Right.
So
So it's for the Great Lakes.
It's not the whole board that attends that.
Right, but didn't we pass a resolution that committee meetings were going to be open to the public? And
I think that these meetings were the Great Lakes meetings.
They were the
They
Great
weren't
Lakes
specific to
meetings.
DEI
there were the
committee.
planning
wasn't
meetings
specific.
for,
That's my bad for calling it the DEI committee. It's the committee that met in Indy.
Mr.
But the
Keller?
good news is that they're no longer functioning, so.
Mr. Keller? Building and committee report?
Thanks, President Gleebach. I didn't have any committee meetings this past month, but I was able to see Mr. Howerton a couple times. As always, had some great conversations with him, and I always leave very much impressed with both Mr. Howerton and Mr. Shanavir, as well as the rest of the staff in the office. Because I think, trying to juggle 900 kids, it's quite the feat. So, again, I'm very impressed with how they are operating things over in the middle school. Lots of things that, I don't know how many people are on Mr. Howerton's email list, but he has literally 100 things that he lists off about what's going on this day, that day. So if you feel as though you're not aware of what's going on, you're not reading your emails, because Mr. Howerton is all over it. So thanks again to him for his diligence in keeping both board members and community members informed. A couple of things, just wanted to give some shout outs to our February Students of the Month. We had Ella Nelson from 8B, the team 8B, so 8th graders, and then Paige Wozni from the 7B team. There was some yearbook contest winners, so I just wanted to congratulate them for their great work. That's Keely Walaske. Keely had the front cover award. And then on the back, we had Cece Basnick. And then Eiley Penela was the planner cover. So again, great job to the 3 of you, and appreciate your good work. There were some students from both the middle school and the high school. There were 19 in total. that presented some speeches at the Optimist Oratorical Competition, and 11 of those are going to advance to the annual competition coming up here at the end of the month on February the 26th. We had the counselors from the high school come in and visit all of our 8th graders to kind of walk through some of the choices that they'll be able to make for 9th grade, and I know a lot of kids were very excited about that. The middle school cheer teams, last Friday, they got first place at the middle school mashup. So the Hartland Blue team, they had the highest score of their season, their highest score, excuse me, of the season, and ended up with a first place finish for the 6, 7, and 8 grade combined division. And then Hartland Gold, they actually had the highest score of the entire competition. So congratulations to them. And they were in the 7th and 8th grade division. We've got the unified basketball team and the swim and dive teams coming up here shortly, starting their seasons. And then we've got some of the 8th graders that will be visiting the Holocaust Memorial Center on the 24th. And then kind of last but not least, related to the middle school, there was a couple of new POM coaches that we had this year, and the team made it to the state finals. They, being new, didn't realize some of the protocols in order to secure transportation, so the day before, it was kind of a bit of a panic about trying to get a bus to get to the Eastern Michigan, and I forget the name of the center there, but where they were competing. So I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Marino and Mr. Hughes for some of the work behind the scenes to try to make that happen for the 7th and 8th grade POM team. And then last but not least, with the driver, I just want to shout out to Mr. Robinson. I don't know if he listens to school board meetings. I hope for his sake, probably not. But if you're listening, Mr. Robinson, the POM team very much appreciates your willingness to take the call last minute on a Sunday. And so concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Mrs. Shaw?
Unfortunately, I have not been able to connect with the staff at Farms because Mr. Hughes keeps calling snow days when I'm scheduled to be there. So we'll see if we can maybe connect later this month. So
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
keep calling snow days, though, if you have to.
No building report. I've been to a number of athletic events, though, and it's great to see our athletes compete. We have great athletes, great teams, great work by them in the athletic department. And a big shout out to the Lively's. The pep band at the high school varsity basketball games is awesome. It's great to hear. So it's a job well done by them.
Awesome. For me, my village, I have no committee reports. My village report is on the 7th. They had a very successful glow dance, packed the house for that. They have coming up in March their slam night, and so they took back several years ago, we used to have literacy night at Village where we would have guest readers and a book fair and all of the things. And they've turned it into a bit of a science and literacy and art celebration. And so we have kids that are presenting their experiments, kids that are presenting their art, a silent auction, kind of all of the things. And so that will be here coming up. They have Popcorn Friday this Friday. And so I know that the kids, every kid in the district looks forward to Popcorn Friday. And then they're planning their grade field trip. So each grade is going to a different, some do the walking field trip. 4th graders obviously do a little bit of a bigger field trip, but everyone will be going on a field trip. And then they're starting their testing prep. And so starting to get ready, get the kids introduced to what that will look like so that they can be successful in the spring. All right. Moving on to item 2A, 2024-25 budget amendments.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer, approves the 2024-25 budget amendments as presented.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion on 2024-25 budget amendments?
I just have one quick thing to say, and that is a big thank you to our CFO, Rachel Boyce. As many who watch or follow these meetings know, we're constantly talking about everything's last minute, and we're lucky to get things 1 or 2 business days in advance. But Ms. Boyce sent this out to the board, I think, over 2 weeks ago. giving everyone plenty of time to ask questions, schedule meetings. She was very diligent in answering some questions I had, and it made it so much easier to prepare for today's meeting and not try to fit in everything on a Friday and a Monday. So I just want to say thank you to our CFO for planning ahead. And it was obviously in the packet as well, but to have it 2 weeks in advance is a huge, huge benefit to board members to make sure we can do our due diligence. So thank you.
Any further discussion?
I just want to echo Mr. Scott's sentiments. You know, Rachel was able to meet with me for over an hour, so we were able to talk about a lot of different topics and questions. So for everyone else, spare you an extra hour of your time. So again, Rachel, thanks for meeting with me and answering all my questions. And I think, Ken, you do a very good job of putting together these budgets.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogoleski?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 2B, revised policies for Neola, postponed, well, no, revised policies Neola. Is there a motion on the table?
I move, well, I was debating whether to read them individually, or are we going to read the alternative version?
I just need a motion to react to.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent and the assistant superintendent of personnel, adopts revised policies 1130, 3110, 4110, 5340, 6110, 6111, 6114, 6325, 7310, and 8321 as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman. Discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to, I noted earlier in the agenda approval that there was still a couple things that I think just probably got overlooked based on the conversations that I had with the team and then also what I shared with the board this past month. So in my mind, I'd like to see either we postpone these or again, move these down to the discussion items. So again, for example, in 1130, Section B, there was a reference that it was missing officers or agents. And again, this is all under the premise that all three policies read identically. I know there was some conversation about whether or not we just have one policy versus 3 standalones for the various sections. And that way we avoid any kind of issues if one reads one way and one reads another. But again, with 1130, there was still one more requested correction that I had put out there a month ago. 3110 looked like it incorporated everything. I don't have any issues there. 4110, though, there were 3.
Can I go ask you a question back to
Yes.
1130? It indicates the staff member, officer, agent, or board member on that item.
Sorry, which item?
Item, I think is it B? Is
Well,
that-
it's large B, not A. Let's see.
Oh.
I think you're looking at A.
Okay, I'm looking at the
3B.
Yeah.
Is that what you're looking at? Yep. So in actual subsection B, in the middle of the paragraph, it says, exceptions will be made known to the employees, and what's missing that's within the other policies is officers or agents, supervisor. So if you add the word officers or agents, then it would be consistent again with 3110.
Were you indicating in that request that conflict of interest policies for that they be made known to all officers and not just their employee supervisor? So they would submit them,
Well, again, it's just making the language the same. So if you want to flip ahead to 3110, if you read that exact same section, it's adding those words. So I guess I wasn't advocating that we add it in there, but again, in the spirit of being consistent, I felt we should include it
it's
in
not
there.
there.
3B.
They raised the same.
Maybe it's 4110 then that had it.
It's in 4110.
Yeah.
Again, a reminder that you have to look at where each one of these groups is covered under the policy. So professionals, administrators, then professionals for 30,000, and then support staff for 4,100. And the question I think Megan had is, do you really want them to report to officers and agents or just their supervisors? So the language, you can put it there, it's not going to hurt it. That to me is a grammatical, if we added that back in there to make sure that all four of them said the same, but it doesn't, it wasn't there in the first place because administrators are different than professional staff, are different than support staff, and who they are to respond to. That was my point a long time ago, but just want to point it out again.
Well, I mean, I can say that in a neighboring district that has the exact same vendor and the exact same language, it's in there. So, again, just trying to be consistent.
I mean, that's one of my largest issues in general with all of these policies, is there seems to be zero transparency as far as how these arrive to us. As Mr. Keller stated, other districts get packages from Neola that have various options and selections and generally are reviewed by a policy committee. Somehow they come to us in a different format with all of these grammatical errors, typos, et cetera. And I have not been able to get any sort of explanation of where these come from, how they arrive to us, and why we can't have some communication with Neola and see the original documents that relate to these. So specifically.
Mr. Scott, I think
Yes.
that's going to be discussed as part of a discussion item, so if we could keep this discussion to these specific policies, that would be great.
Well, I mean, at last month's meeting, you instructed Mr. Hughes to find out why 1130 includes board members, why that's not in the bylaws. And so, I mean, so it's in administrative policy. So we're taking policies for administrators and wrapping board members into them. It makes absolutely no sense to me why we would do this. Here is the administrative guidelines. I'm reading from the policy manual that I just picked up from the cart. The administrative guidelines are intended to give direction to the staff in carrying out the policies adopted by the Board of Education. So why are we adding board members into administrative guidelines? Nobody has been able to answer that question, other than Mr. Hughes at the beginning of this meeting say, I talked to Pat, he says it's fine. I'm sorry, I'd like to talk to Pat. I tried to talk to Pat and was told he wouldn't talk to me. So I'm absolutely not comfortable passing these in those circumstances when we can look and see what other districts get from Neola, and it doesn't seem to match what we get from Neola. So I think there's something missing. And yes, it will be a conversation that we have when we talk about committee structure. But again, to start passing these just to hurry up and do it so we can move along is not responsible in my opinion.
Sorry,
Any
so
further
to just kind of continue on my original thought. So for 5340, there was the new language. It says beginning with 2025, 26, sorry, this is the third paragraph for everybody. And this isn't, by the way, this is nothing new that I'm bringing to the table, just so everyone's clear. Beginning with the 2025, 2026 school year, it says the board shall develop a cardiac response plan. Now, Mr. Hughes was able to provide that to me, but to me, it wasn't the board that developed the plan, it was the district. So I think as a board, we should discuss if this is worded correctly, which is again why I'm advocating that these move from action to discussion, again, just for that specific policy. And
Can I explain that to you? Because as a board member, you have to understand what your role is, first of all. And your role is to hire a superintendent to run the operations of the school district. And when it says the board shall, what it's talking about is the board under its authority shall grant the superintendent the responsibility to run the district. And so what you're reading is your literal interpretation versus the board. These are board policies that the board then says, superintendent, you need to do these things. And so the cardiac response plan has been in place for a few years now as part of our emergency operations plan, as approved by the Michigan State Police and the operations, Teresa Cremonti, who is the
County
He's the
Emergency
county-
Response.
County Emergency Response Coordinator. So what I said to you, Greg, is that we've already developed this. The board shall develop it through the superintendent, right? Direction through the superintendent to make sure it's in place. It's in place. It's in all of our emergency response plans. So I would say you don't have to read that literally, except read it from the standpoint of what is your role as a board member? Your role as a board member is to hire the superintendent to get this job done.
I think
That's a
lot of
perfect segue,
policies
but-
refer to the board and the board's oversight of developing things, just like the board develops curriculum, the board develops
Understand.
plans for X, Y, or Z.
But if, again, it's about consistency. So if you flip
Right.
to the very next
And
policy.
if I may, real quick, on that
6111.
policy, before we go to the next one, the item that we're.
Mr. Keller needs to finish his discussion first, and then, unless he's going to hand it over to you.
No,
wanna
I
give
appreciate
everyone-
it. So, if you look at 6111, the very first sentence, the superintendent shall establish, document, and maintain. So again, in the theme of who's doing what, in one case we're saying board, one case we're saying superintendent. I'm just asking that we're saying the same thing all the
So are you asking for
time.
legal clarity?
I'm asking the board to approve it as the superintendent does it, not that the board does it.
Well, what if it's not the superintendent that does it? What if the superintendent directs employees A, B, and C to devise this policy that he approves?
But then it wouldn't be the board, right?
We hire the
wouldn't be the
superintendent to
superintendent,
delegate these duties to develop plans through the superintendent.
Okay. Are you done with your discussion, so I can kick it over to Mr.
On that,
Scott?
I've got, items for each policy, but, so if you want me to go through these one at a time, we can, or?
My comment was merely to support Mr. Keller in the fact that the item we're striking out on that policy is the superintendent's responsibility with first aid and CPR, and we're replacing that with the board responsibility for a cardiac response plan. So this is the kind of thing that I believe if we saw the original from Neola, it probably has multiple options for us to select from on whether we want to put that responsibility on the board or the superintendent. That's what I've seen in other districts. So the fact that we as a board don't get a chance to look at those options, make those selections, is concerning to me. And the fact that, we have no choice in what ends up in front of us. There's no policy committee, no committee of the whole to review these, other than these kind of haphazard discussions here.
And I'd just like to add, too, that when you have a policy where you could have several people read it and it means different things to different people, it's a bad policy, and it requires clarification.
So, okay, go ahead, continue, and then I'll circle back.
Thank you, President Glealock. So in 6110, I think some of this we're going to talk about when we get to 3A, I guess it is. So I won't necessarily belabor those, but jumping ahead to 6114, because that's not one that's in 3A. There's a policy 6116, time and effort reporting, that's not included. But again, it's referencing that same Title II Code of Federal Regulations. So I just want to confirm, is that an oversight from Neola that it wasn't included, or if there's a reason why it wasn't?
Rachel, you happen to know that one?
It's likely not included because there were no changes to the time and effort reporting requirements. These policies are addressing individual items within the whole CFR 200 part, like 1700 through 1800. So that's likely why it's not recommended to make any change to that policy. And I have not seen anything that in comings and goings that they've made any amendments to the time and effort reporting. So that's likely why there's been no changes recommended to that.
And that may be the case. I guess I would just like to verify it, right? So we don't overlook it if there's some potential gap. With 7310, that's also one that's not in 3A. And again, all this is from January, so it's hopefully not new. But in the very first paragraph, disposition of the surplus property, it talks about doing a review periodically. I was proposing that as a board, we put some guardrails around how long it, what does periodically mean? Is that every 10 years? Is that every 1 year? Is it every 6 months? I think we should define that better for the team so that they understand what our request is with that. So let's see, the last one, I think 8321 was not part of 3A. So again, last month I asked that we just remove the reference to Thrun because we could just say district legal counsel as opposed to specifically calling out Thrun in the event that there was ever any changes. And I think that covers all of my previously sent correspondence to the team.
I just have one quick question, and this should be a real easy answer. When these changes come from Neola, are we getting the raw change and seeing what they're proposing, or does this get filtered before it gets to us?
Yep, so I'll explain that. As always has been, Neola comes in and says, hey, here are the legal changes to the policies that need to be taken care of. And so what we do is we sit down with Neola, we go over all the legal changes. We then take that document and we compare it to our current policy. We align it with that policy. We also align it with any contract language, any handbook language, any other language that the district operates under policies, practices, and procedures, and we then bring that to the board. So let's give you an example. Let's just say discipline. Let's just throw that one out there. There might be a number of options for reasons for removing somebody. And we look at those options and we say, yes, these are these options. These are the ones that we currently have in our policy. We make sure that those ones remain there. These ones are in violation of the board or the master agreement with that particular unit. We don't even put those in there because the board can't discuss it anyway because it's contractual. You can't violate contract. So as long as I've been the superintendent of this district, the way it's operated is exactly like that. And so what you see is what's aligned with how we've been doing business with the changes that are the legal changes that the Neola is asking you to change. Now, not every policy has selections and choices, and it's every once in a while there might be a policy that has a selection and choice, and we just make sure it's aligned before we send it forward. That's how we do business.
So the packet of options that you referenced, who gets that?
If there's options, it would be in front of us when we're talking to our Neola rep. And then we would say, we print these off that are aligned with what we currently do.
So who is us?
Myself, Renee, Kate, Dave, Rachel, whoever is functioning to review those policies. For all these
Financial ones.
financial ones, Rachel reviews them to make sure that they're in line with how we do business.
The policy review is the responsibility of the board. So to have these filtered before we even see them seems, it seems wrong, especially when we're the ones paying Neola for these recommendations and then don't get to see Neola's recommendations in full.
If you want to change the way we've done it for as long as I've been here, then that's up to the board to change the process. It's worked well for this district, and that's how we've done it in the past.
So I'm going to refocus everyone to the motion that's on the table that we should be discussing. There is a discussion item coming up in discussion. Can we please stay on the agenda? Mr. Keller, did you motion for something differently in this motion? I heard a lot of discussion.
I did not. It was simply discussion, appealing to the team about why I felt that this should be a discussion and not an action item. But I'm happy to make a motion to, once again, move these to discussion. But we've already denied that motion in the, in the onset, so if someone else has a different motion, I would entertain that.
I move to postpone all of these action items until the March general meeting.
Second.
Hold on, guys. Sorry, I'm going to write with my red so I can. Mr. Scott, just for means of the minutes and so people can listen, can you please repeat what you have just said?
Yeah, and I'll clarify. I move to postpone action item 2B, which includes Neola revised policies 1130, 3110, 4110, 5340, 6110, 6111, 6114, 6325, 7310, and 8321 to the March 2025 general meeting.
And that's supported by Mr. Gogoleski.
Yes.
Any discussion on the motion from Mr. Scott to postpone these action items, action item 2B to the March 2025 general meeting?
Mr. Hughes, is there a hard deadline on these? I mean, I know we want to be efficient, but is there any harm that would be caused to the district by waiting 1 month?
It depends if something comes up and the policy is not in line with what it should be. What if something comes up that's a conflict of interest? I don't know. I can't answer that question. I think it's pertinent to get these done, and then if you want to change it next time through the discussion today, then that's your prerogative, but I think they should be taken care of.
I also am just requesting by those members of the board sitting up here today that if you have questions or need clarification from Pat, please give me a list in the next week so that I can set up some time with him. Mr. Keller, you and I have already chatted. Every other person I have not talked to. Hearing no further discussion, we are voting on the motion made by Mr. Scott to postpone the items 2B to the March 2025 general election meeting, general meeting. Supported by Mr. Gogoleski. Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Gogoleski.
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman.
No.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw.
No.
Mr. Campbell.
No.
And I'm a no, that motion passes. Does not pass, excuse me. Going back to the original motion presented by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman. Any further discussion?
I'd like to say that I think this is now the fourth meeting that we've talked about these. I've been in the audience before, at least the third. Good grief. I think we're trying to avoid this. And I know, Mr. Keller, I've talked to you twice since the last meeting, not recently, but since we're here today, and there just continues to be things that come up. And I appreciate, too, we want to see the legal guidance on this, but there are people in place that we trust to make those good decisions. I think it's appropriate to pass these, accept these today, and then tweak them if we need to moving forward, but it just keeps to be kicked down the road. And if we go with specific questions next time, the questions we're asked today to Mr. Hughes, I think are acceptable. He's saying there's a chain of command, basically. That's why there's not people that are reported to each time for each incident. And I think everything we're told is acceptable. And it's always like a brainstorming session where we're rifling through papers, trying to keep up. And I know we're not trying to do that right now, go slowly through as you talk, but it's just, I think it's appropriate to pass these, and then we can decide in each one for discussion items next time what needs to be looked at, specific questions and not in the moment.
I'm also happy to set up small groups with Pat, as we just did with some other items. But people do need to get me their questions ahead of time because these people need to come prepared to talk about things and not just kind of an open forum. It just helps keep some mindful of time.
Well, with that, though, I'd like to say that it would be good for us to have the raw information, get it unfiltered. This is where questions come up, And for the life of me, for whatever reason, in this district, the term of, well, that's the way we've always done it, is used incredibly much that I don't get it. I don't care how long we've done it. If we're having an inefficiency in getting it done, let's work on that. Let's change it.
I think we can talk about that in item 3B, Mr. Gogolewski.
Sure.
So, since we have got nothing back from Neola or Mr. Hughes in regards to the conflict of interest, 1130, 3110, 4110, I move to amend all three conflict of interest policies to remove the words "and board member" or board member in any location. And if you want, I can go through and read off where they exist.
I have a motion to amend. You're going to have to repeat the language, Mr. Scott. I can't follow any longer.
To amend 1130, 3110, and 4110 to remove the term, quote, "and board member," unquote, I'm sorry, "and board members," unquote, and/or the term, quote, "or board member," unquote, and/or the term, "or board members," unquote. Essentially
Second.
removing board members from administrative policies and staff policies.
I have a motion by Mr. Scott to amend 113031104110 to remove the term "and board members," quote, "and/or board members," quote, and/or, I can't follow your last one.
Board member in the singular or plural. It varies from singular or plural depending on the location.
Okay. A motion to amend by Mr. Scott,
Second.
supported by Mr. Gogolewski.
So then the existing bylaw would be the only policy that governs board members? Is that what I'm hearing?
That would be my intention.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Real quick, I think what we need to do, because this, I agree with Mr. Campbell, going through all this stuff is really annoying. It's time consuming. We need a different way in which we can discuss these things and not just bring them to a once a month meeting, and starting with getting the actual raw information and then talking about it. I don't want to get into a problem solving session right now, but I think we need to work on a change that makes it easier for all of us to understand, not run into all of these configurations of, does it match with this, does it match with that, and do it a little bit differently. I don't think that the way we've been doing it for so long is working real well.
Mr. Gogolewski, I think item 3B, we can talk about what that solution is that everyone feels comfortable with.
Okay.
Any additional discussion on Mr. Scott's motion in 113031104110? Again, this is a motion by Mr. Scott, supported by Mr. Gogolewski, to amend the original motion. Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Gogolewski?
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman?
No.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
No.
Mr. Campbell?
No.
I'm a no. That motion does not pass. Moving back to the original motion by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Scott?
Can you repeat the motion? Is this to approve everything?
It's the motion as presented on paper, so it's the Board of Education upon the recommendation of the superintendent and assistant superintendent as
No.
presented.
No.
Mr. Gogolewski?
No.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 2C, policy number 0166, agenda.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the board president, adopts policy 0166 as presented.
Support. Motion by Mrs. Coleman, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion? Policy 0166, agenda as presented.
So this is the one that was from the previous packet, not the one I emailed, correct?
Correct, the one you emailed, I believe, is 3A.
Yeah, so I'm just going to tell the group that, I'd prefer that we handle all these together. So for me, my vote is no, and I will save my conversation till 3A.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Gogolewski?
No.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 2D, policy number 1241, 5611, an opt-in policy for racial harassment training, programming, and surveys.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, adopts revised policy 1241, non-reemployment of the superintendent as discussed and presented.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman. Any discussion?
Just have a general question. When was this language for 1241 that we're looking at? Was there any previous markups or anything submitted to the board prior to the issuance of the packet? Because I looked in the previous packet, and what's in February's is different than what was in January. So
The item in the previous packet in February, or we're in February, in January's, as we talked about on the phone, Mr. Keller, was highlighted, and I think you asked me in that meeting, hey, it's highlighted, what are your edits? In which I verbally had said. And my edits being us putting ourselves in a bind. I'm in agreement that new contracts, 3 years, that's fine. I know there's a lot of discussion on that, but I think putting ourselves in a bind to only offer interim contracts really isn't the best laid plan.
I guess one of the points I was trying to make is that, there's stuff that's discussion that we've had on the table for over a month, and now we're voting on something that we've seen now for 3 days. So again, just trying to understand the rationale.
But it was discussed.
The language was not. I mean, the policies that I had on the table were discussed as well, but these are discussion again.
We added the highlighted words, correct? At the table last month in
The words
discussion.
were highlighted, yeah.
Yes,
And I had to indicate they were being striked out.
right.
So why are we treating the two differently? So with a policy proposed and read last month, and Mr. Keller made added suggestions, that is moved to discussion, but this one is moved to action item. What's the difference?
The difference is that this was the sole discussion around that item in last month's meeting. Whereas in the previous meeting, we discussed these, it was then taken back, there was changes made, and so we're trying to separate them, so we're not making changes in real time, but these changes were already discussed.
But the language we're voting on is not what we looked at in January.
Yeah, this is all the same language. I think the only word there that was new, per the discussion, I think, Greg, if I'm not mistaken, you submitted this change. This whole
No.
section, somebody submitted that whole change.
No, it was the
It
whole
wasn't me.
It was that whole section, and that was discussed, and at the board meeting, you guys talked about, yes, we agree that a new superintendent should only have a 3-year contract, and so that's what this references. A new superintendent, it only gets a 3-year contract.
Correct, yeah, that's what we discussed for this policy.
But once again, the point being, we discussed it last month and we're voting on it, but for some reasons, other things that we discussed last month, we're discussing again. I'm, again, trying to understand the distinction.
Because we discussed two different things. I think we discussed, originally, we thought we discussed a postponement because you had not only grammatical concerns, but then brought forward the additions. And those additions weren't in those original discussions.
but it was shared with the board.
Correct. And, okay, so the originals were not in the discussion packet for anyone in the public to know that anything was being changed in regards to that. You get what I'm saying? You and I had a 30-minute conversation about this. The board can certainly choose what they want to do. I'm just here to facilitate at this point. Right now, I have a motion on the table by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman.
So how did it read last month?
It was highlighted language, and then I had to ask to clarify.
So everything that was in there last month is in here and struck out?
I think the only word is new, and that was part of the discussion. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? Hearing none. Mr. Scott?
For the fact that we have a discussion later about policies in general, I'm going to say no.
Okay. Mr. Gogoleski?
No.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes. That motion passes. We have additional motions as part of this action item.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, adopts revised policy 5611, due process rights as presented.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion on 5611 due process rights?
Just a question. So how do we define preponderance of evidence standard?
Kate, you want to handle that, or you want me to? I can handle it.
It's under
Preponderance
5611.
of evidence is, as you do the investigation, the reality is, there's so much evidence, it's overwhelming, that we believe, even if it's he said, she said, we believe that this to be true, and therefore we're taking action. Preponderance of evidence is a lower threshold.
Correct. So legal aspects has to have proof, essentially. We get to interview kids and use that and review cameras and body language and everything else to create our preponderance of evidence.
Mr. Keller, would you like me to get a legal definition the next time?
No, that's okay. The other question I had was, if we remove the language that's struck through, so basically section C, that was added or approved in December, what is the parents and students' avenue, how are they protected, I guess, if there's no suspension or expulsion? Because A and B talk about specifically suspension and B is expulsion. Well, what if there's a scenario that doesn't result in either of those two? And if we strike through this, how do we cover those options?
Well, first of all, this was added due to the tracker system and specifically targeted towards the tracker system that we are using to keep track of incidents. And so minus the tracker system, which we know is not appropriate in this case, we've made the argument to you as a board, and we have had counsel make an argument to you as a board that it's not appropriate for here, that the reality is this is not necessary. This is not something that's gonna hinder any situation at all. The fact is, preponderance of evidence is, I believe it to be true, and so it's done there. If I don't suspend you, there is no appeal process. It is what it is. If I haven't changed your placement, remember, I gotta keep that legal terminology in place. If I haven't changed your placement by suspending you or expelling you, then there's not an appeal process, nor should there be. There's not, in the law, there's not an appeal process. The school is given the rights to be in loco parentis, in place of the parent in the school system. We're making decisions every day on what's right and what's wrong and how we handle things.
As a taxpayer and a resident prior to being on this board, I stood at that podium several times and criticized this board for failing to protect the rights of students that got caught up in these investigations related to the DOJ stuff. this may not be perfect, but I certainly would not rescind it without some other protections that we can put in place. Nobody's come to the table with alternative protections or policies. The parents of this community need to know that this board and this district takes the rights of their students seriously, doesn't put a student in a position that they may jeopardize their ability to get a federal student loan, their ability to get a job, any of those things later on down the road because of how this district handled or mishandled information. And certainly giving the parents and the students more rights in that process is a good thing, and I support that. So I do not support rescinding this, especially without some alternative method by which we can offer protection to our students.
Mr. Scott, I would be more than happy. I think that probably the appropriate counsel would be Mr. Comstock to talk about what acceptable language looks like. It would probably be a joint discussion between them and Thrun. I'm happy to schedule that to understand what language might be acceptable in the future as a follow-up.
Well, I guess again, my position or my concern is that we're potentially taking this away without, Mr. Scott mentioned as well, but that we're not replacing it with anything. And there seems to be some, I'll say, fear that if we don't do this, there's going to be something bad happen to the district in terms of legal ramifications. And, at the end of the day, I think history has shown that if there is an issue that the DOJ has, they are going to come to the district first prior to any sort of punitive or legal course of action being initiated. And, I would hate to see this board make a decision that is based in fear as opposed to something that is, putting the students and the parents first. So I just ask for your careful deliberation before you potentially rescind this policy.
I have to agree with that wholeheartedly.
Any additional discussion on 5611?
Just one comment. You mentioned that you wouldn't want us to put something in place or to take something away based in fear, but I think that this section was added to this policy with motivations that were based in fear as well, just a fear of something different. And after having the conversation that we had, that Megan was able to set up with our legal counsel, that both Jeff and Greg were able to participate in, I felt that a lot of those questions regarding this were answered and answered well, so that I feel confident that we can remove this because of the information that Travis was able to provide us via our contact at the DOJ. So I feel comfortable with making this change, that I feel the change was made in fear. I feel comfortable taking it away.
So, but the message that sends to our constituents is, trust me. And frankly, I don't think most of them do, given the current situation. So maybe he was able to satisfy you, maybe he was able to satisfy me, but we don't have anything to put on paper in writing and pass out. And that may be in the works, but it doesn't exist right now. So again, I will vote with the parents of this community. I will vote with the students of this community to protect them in every turn, every corner, as much as possible. And I'm not just going to tell them, trust me, I'm going to stand behind policies that protect and support them.
Any additional discussion on 5611?
I think that, Mr. Scott, you said that maybe it satisfied you, maybe it satisfied Mrs. Coleman, but we are the parents. We were elected here by them to feel good about what we're going to pass or not pass. And I agree, no one's coming up and saying, we'll add this legal jargon. So we don't have that. I'm not able to do that. I can't add that. But if you're wanting that, I encourage you, or Mr. Keller too, you're talking about that, adding something, be that person, and lead that. So after we approve or disapprove this, that we're going to vote on here in a moment, follow that up with these other policies. And I know, I applaud you because I know you have met with Mr. Hughes previous weeks. on these policies, but keep that going and don't let it die here and just wait for something bad to happen where you think that there's going to be a disclosure. Just continue this and make it a discussion item later to add what you come up with for it. That would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I guess I'll just speak for myself. You know, I heard the answers. I don't, as a parent, you know, I was acting as a board member in that particular meeting, but I would say as a parent, I'm not satisfied. So I can say that with certainty. With respect to the previous policy being created out of fear, it was actually not that at all. It was kind of along the lines of what you're suggesting, Mr. Campbell, which is to put a policy out there to take leadership on trying to protect everyone. So I think that's kind of what we tried to do.
It was proactive.
Which,
Yeah.
you know, the board has an opportunity to undo it if it wishes. But again, I think everything you just asked us to do, we did. So, you know, how you vote, that's, I guess, up to you to decide. But again, I hope you will take into account, you know, what I strongly believe is what the parents would want. And I think if it was your child that was in the situation, you would be thankful that you voted in favor of keeping this policy in there.
I also believe that there is a purpose for us to be up here at the board, and that is to protect the kids that we represent. And to have nothing in place is just another recipe for disaster. And nobody wants to come back to the same policy 4, 5, 6 times, revising it in a year or two because we just didn't get it right. So with that, I have to say that I'm against rescinding.
It's more than a purpose. It's an ethical responsibility to do what's right for the children and the students. And rescinding their ability to have an appeal process is the absolute opposite of that. So I'm going to vote not with my morals, but with my ethical responsibility to the students of this district to put them first and nothing else. Because that's what matters. And if people at this table don't agree with that, that's fine. But to take away their protections without putting something in place otherwise is, I believe, a ethical violation, certainly a moral violation.
I also believe it's probably a violation to give them false hope that there's something that can be changed. And so while I'm not opposed to language, I think giving them, making it seem as if our agreement aligns with the same language that would align with, I don't know, I'm just giving it an expulsion hearing, it doesn't. And so then we have to say, okay, what does? And this doesn't accurately reflect that.
And so then the motion, the policy presented could have been a modification to align that, but that's not what was presented to the board. What was presented to the board was just to purely rescind it. And that's not a solution. To take it back without offering a solution is a disservice.
Any further discussion on 5611?
Have there been any community members reach out about their concern for not rescinding this?
Zero.
I haven't heard anything. I think we got a lot of, I would have to go through my email, but I think originally there was a lot of email traffic. But in the last 30 days, no. And sometimes people lump policies together unintentionally without realizing what the policy actually says. I think we've all experienced that. Any further discussion? Mr. Scott?
I vote with the students. I vote with the parents of this community. I vote no.
Mr. Gogoleski?
Absolutely not, no.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Mr. Scott, if you would like to follow up with me, I'd be more than happy to work on that amendment with you.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, rescinds new policy opt-in for racial harassment, training, programming, and surveys, parentheses DEI, as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Sorry, my brain must not be firing on all cylinders. Any discussion? Just to clarify, and I want to clarify this with Mr. Hughes, the rescindment of this opt-in policy does not rescind the opt-out policy.
Absolutely not. We made that clear.
So I have a question. On this particular opt-in, if we were to rescind it, could we get administrative buy-in to at least send a letter to every parent? Sort of an acknowledgement that says you have the opportunity to opt out and have them return it? They're not opting in or out in that letter. It's just, it would be a letter acknowledging their receipt that they know that they have that opportunity to opt out.
Like a general letter or in reference to this?
It would be in reference to this, saying, dear parents, here's some training materials that we're going to offer. You will have the right to opt out if you choose not to take it. Please sign this letter that says I've read this letter and that I know my right as a parent to opt out. Would the team be willing to do that in lieu of an opt-in?
What do we, just a clarifying question before I turn to Dave and ask him what the letter actually says. What do we do about parents that don't return it?
Right.
What I would point to is my recent communication with the parents of our 7 through 12 students on the student survey that we're giving. Presented the survey, all of the questions, and an opt-out form for them to sign and return. We get that form, they're opted out. Dave and I have talked, and Dave, you can jump in, and Kate, because she's part of this as well, is we have said to the board, whatever program we provide, we will get that out to the parents ahead of time. If you go to my website, you'll notice that I always have a resource page at the end of the superintendent update. In my weekly update, I'll say, parents, go to this link. They can see everything, just like at the beginning of the year when we shared with parents what we were sharing on see something, say something, or see something, hear something, say and do something. We will provide that information for our parents with an opt-out form for them to sign and fill out and send to their school or their child's teacher if they're the younger children, but we will do that. We made that commitment up front. We've talked about it with the team that went to Indianapolis. All of the work we're doing will be definitely available for parents to see and opt out of.
Mr. Keller, understanding that there's going to be parents that don't acknowledge it, are you more comfortable with two means of communication, like email and hard copy, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sold or, necessarily in love with either approach, but again, my whole point is I want to make sure that the parents acknowledge that they know they have that right. Because I think the concern on whether you're in favor of opt-out or opt-in, I think the concern from everybody is that, well, the parents are busy, they're not going to have a chance to read it. So again, my biggest thing is making sure that they're aware. And if they sign a letter that says again, it's not a letter saying you're opting in or opting out, it's just a letter of acknowledgement. So whether that comes via email or whether it comes back home with the kids as a letter from their teacher, I think you could do both or one or the other. I defer to the district's discretion on what would be more efficient in terms of facilitating it.
Does
But
the team anticipate this will happen this school year? So when you register your students, right?
Yeah, you gotta do that.
You do the opt-out of, social media photos, and that's all part of student registration, right? Having to read, click, no, I don't, I mean, is it something we could add to student registration when you register your students at the beginning of each school year?
I think regardless, it's probably a good thing to add there, because it would cover much more than just this, just, hey,
Right,
these are the topics.
everyone has to, a parent has to log in or guardian has to log in and
Example
build it up.
topics. I don't want to negate your point, but I'm saying in general,
And I think it's important to understand
Probably
that,
do it.
we don't want
in
to
parentheses, put the topics.
I'm sorry. We don't want, we think it's unfeasible to try to collect 5,500 pieces of paper, one for each child, or 5,100 pieces of paper, one for each child, when the easier way to do it, and certainly the messaging that goes out to parents is, here it is, read through it, send the form if you want to opt out. Now we're collecting the number of people that absolutely have done their homework, read through the information, and filled out the form to say, I don't want my child to do this. And I think that's the best way to approach it.
Excuse me, I'm a little baffled as to why this is even a conversation, given the current situation. The district received a letter from the Department of Education last week threatening to cut off federal funds for any DEI in the school. So, and as Mr. Hughes sent out to the board, we received $2.2 million in federal funds. So to me, it seems like we're trying to double down on DEI in opposition, in complete opposition to a directive from the Department of Education to remove this completely from the district.
I would say, Jeff, in response to that, you don't even know what we're planning. You don't know the intricacies. Glenn has been involved, Kristen has been involved, Dave and Kate have been involved, working with some thought processes for what this would look like in Hartland, and how we teach kids to be respectful of each other and to embrace each other. And you saw my email today, so.
You're right, I don't know what we're planning because we have closed-door secret committee meetings.
You will see all this information
where it's
before it
not
goes out.
accessible,
Okay,
which I
Right, we're not
which I
going back and
oppose.
forth. We're going to keep on.
So have we had a review from legal as it relates to the letter from the Department of Education last week, or any of the executive orders related to DEI?
We have not had any review for action as to changing course. I think you're very right, Mr. Scott, that the original executive orders obviously followed executive office, and it's kind of trickling down from there. And so much like with the Title IX revisions, that we just hold still until we get some directive. And that might mean remove, that might mean that the agreement goes away. It could mean 17 different things. But I think we're not prepared today to understand what that looks like for our district, and so.
So why is this in front of us? We're saying in spite of executive orders, in
Still have an
spite of the
agreement.
Department of Education, we are going to automatically opt in everybody's kids into DEI training.
That's
When the
not what that
Department of
says.
Education, it says, the policy provides parents and guardians with the ability to decide if they will allow their students to receive DEI/CRT and SEL training. So what we're doing, what we're voting on, is to remove the parent and guardian's decision to be involved in that decision, in spite of directives from the U.S. Department of Education to discontinue this altogether. And we've received no legal opinion as to whether this complies with the directive from the U.S. Department of Education, which puts $2.2 million of federal funds received by this district in jeopardy.
Well, we all know that this policy was written without any district input, legal input, and it was passed by the board in December. So this DEI, CRT, and SEL training, that CRT including, that was not language that anyone, vetted or to say, yes, that's what's going to happen and that's what's going to come out of our contract with the DOJ. This was not written with any of those before it was brought to this board at 4:20 PM on the day of a board meeting, 2
Okay,
hours before the board meeting.
Let's focus on.
And was
so let's
voted
focus-
on a month later.
Let's focus on the motion at hand, please, everyone. Motion at hand.
So
A clarifying question.
Yes, you can.
Chuck, does the current opt-out policy still provide parents and guardians with the ability to decide if they will allow their student to receive training?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
Just for the
Mr.
record,
Keller.
what would be the policy number that they could refer to? Do we know that?
There is no policy number because there was no policy number assigned to it.
Well,
The
to the
opt-out.
question of Vice President Coleman, what policy, is there a number, just
Are
for
you-
the record?
We're just telling you that that's what's going to happen.
Hold on.
Trust us.
He's referring to the opt-out.
Correct.
procedure.
There is
correct?
no policy.
So my mistake. It is actually a procedure or a practice that the district utilizes, and it does not take away the ability of parents and guardians to decide what their students can participate in.
So then, for anybody who might be listening, where would someone find that? I guess is the question I have.
When we're ready, we'll post it on our website and I'll.
But you just said it exists already. I'm trying to understand the
I think
existing,
the process exists.
the opt-out
We get it for middle
process.
school health, or
This is what you do
farms
all the
health.
time. Okay, never mind, I'm done.
One last thing
We get
here.
it for farms health. Like you
As someone who's part of this process of what we've been told to develop, I will say this. From what I've seen and what in the direction that it's going, I am getting comfortable. However, if there is anything at the last minute that's put in that would be anything even remotely resembling CRT language or thoughts or whatever, I will preach from the highest mountaintop and make it my life's work and go door to door to every parent's home and just say, look what your kid is getting into. So with that, because let's face it, it's going to pass tonight. It is. There's going to be 3 no's. There's going to be 4 yeses. And as long as we truly Hartlandize it, as the term has been used, it's not going to be that bad. I saw a projected program in place that was startlingly lacking in the kind of stuff that I would expect the DOJ would want to see, which is a good thing. So I think whatever we actually show the parents, that has to be it. And if it's not the direction that we've been going in these last couple of months, well then we're gonna raise a little awareness.
Mr. Gogoleski, thank you for your comments. I think I want to go back to Mr. Keller's point before we move forward with a roll call vote in which how we're communicating this with parents. I think we don't have a solution for what we do when parents don't bring it back or send it back in. So would you be comfortable, or does it make you more comfortable by providing it in 2 forms, so email and hard copy? That way the parent's getting it twice.
Yeah, I would be more welcoming to that idea.
Dave, is that something that you think our teams could do?
Can it be done? Yes. Setting a hard copy of that whole presentation to every single kid, that's a lot of trees.
No, it's
No.
just, it's not the
I
presentation.
think just the opt-out ability.
It's a letter that says you have the right to opt out from this material. You don't have to include the material. It's an acknowledgement letter that needs to be signed and returned.
It's fine.
Okay, but did you hear what he just said? You need to sign and return 5,100 pieces of paper, is what you just said.
I don't know that, I don't think it's realistic to sign and return, but I think the multiple avenues.
I have faith in our parents that they're going to care about their kids' education, and are going to read it and figure it out.
But I think we're
Honestly, I
saying
don't
two
think our high
things.
school kids that form will make it home to parents, the paper form. Just past experience with my own.
I thought we were referring to mailing.
Yeah, again, I didn't make a suggestion on what method, but I just, whatever works for the district, how we can get
One
parents.
awareness, that's what I hear.
Yes.
So we'll send something.
I want to
home
say
hard
this is
copy.
the dumbest conversation I've ever heard. I just can't believe that we're discussing this. This is an opt-out. Our parents are going to get it. They're going to read it. You're going to get it. We already talked about it. Glenn, I'm hoping what I'm not hearing is that you're not trusting me, that I'm going to add stuff at the last second.
No. For the record,
No.
I think everything we should do should be opt-in, not opt-out. I think the social media should be opt-in. I think sex
That
ed
we
should
would
be.
never get anything done.
Well, then you
If
don't
that-
do those things. We
That's-
are,
you know how much stuff that
you know
is?
what our
All right, we're going to
responsibility
focus on this
is?
agenda item. Thank you.
The 7
Thank
of us
you.
at this
Moving
table.
on. Mr. Gogoleski, do you have one last comment?
Yes, I do. No, Mr. Minsker, I am not saying that you would do that or anything like that. And I've said this a lot of times, my distrust is not in the professionals in this room. My distrust is with the government that tells us what to do and how to do it on a whim. That's where my distrust lies.
Thank you, Mr. Gogoleski. All right. Moving forward, motion by Mrs. Coleman, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Gogoleski?
No.
Mrs. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 2E, resolution for civil case authority.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, adopts the resolution designating the board president as its representative to attend case proceedings as necessary and recommended by the district's attorney.
Motion by Mrs. Shaw, supported by Mrs. Coleman. Before I open it up for discussion, I want to be very clear that I obviously indicated to the board after a conversation with Mr. Scott about attending a meeting. We are not allowed to talk about the details of that meeting. There is civil procedures that are protected under federal court, so I do want to be very careful in that. I am not comfortable attending a single other meeting unless I have the support of the board. So I want to make that very clear that there will be no representation from me unless that is supported.
So, obviously, as President Glaybach said, we had some conversation about that meeting, and your attendance at that meeting, there was some things about that were misconstrued, possibly, and I think put you in a bad position, it put the board in a bad position, and I certainly do not believe that any one person on this board should be attending any of these legal proceedings on their own, no matter who they are. You know, my first instinct with this was to kind of come and say, hey, well, let's make it me, so everybody will vote no on it, right? Amend it. And then I thought about it and I said, no, I do not want to be there. I don't want that responsibility. It's not a responsibility, it's a liability, a giant liability, because our presence will, by its mere action, condone whatever's done at that meeting and look like an action of the board. You know, a wink, a nod, a cough, a sneeze, and the attorney takes it as a approval or a disapproval of something that's going on and changes the course of action. No, that's a decision of this board that happens outside of this room. I cannot imagine anyone wanting that responsibility. Furthermore, I think item number 2 is overly broad and dangerous. I think that if we are even going to consider something like this, which again, I think is a bad idea, the language needs to be much more specific. The other thing, and possibly the most concerning thing, was this reviewed by district council?
This was both Mr. Comstock and district council.
Because from our conversation with Mr. Comstock, he did not want to comment on any OMA issues. And so, again, you know me, I have always preached about the Open Meetings Act and this board responsibility to make our decisions at this table with the 7 of us. And, you know, we can disagree like we did tonight, but we made the decision together and we made it in public. And I'm going to walk out of here and I'm going to stick to it and obey it, even though I voted no on most of this stuff. But to have somebody in a closed door meeting, one person of this board conducting business is dangerous. I printed it out.
So we have an option, Mr. Scott.
Yeah.
We can have someone or we have no one. That's our option.
I think a third option that would be possibly to have a 3-person.
But how is that any different, like from an OMA standpoint?
I guess if I was the one person in the room and somebody accused me of making a decision, that's different than being one of 3 in the room and having 2 other people who could say, no, she didn't do that, she didn't say that, we didn't agree to that.
Didn't sneeze.
Again, I'm not she didn't sneeze, she didn't wink, she didn't nod. I'm not in favor of this at all, and I'm going to vote no, no matter how it goes. But I'm saying for those of you who may pass it, I think a single individual is dangerous territory. And if 6 of you refuse to go, I'm not going. And so it really comes down to President Glaybach and Vice President Coleman, if they really want to put themselves in a position like this and expose themselves to, in frankly, personal liability as it relates to the OMA, in my opinion. And I printed that out somewhere, but it's lost in the giant stack of papers. But here it is. A public official who violates OMA shall be personally liable in a civil
I think we're all
action
very well aware.
for actual exemplary damages, et cetera, liability. So
It's just a safe check and balance. I believe that's what he's getting at. But
Any further discussion?
Just to clarify, if I heard correctly, it's either one person or no one? So if this
I
didn't
think that-
pass, we couldn't send 3 people, or maybe there's an alternating crew, if 3 people wanted to go, that is?
I think they would consider probably 2 people. They want to avoid giving the appearance that the board as a whole, like as a group, is there. And so I think that we could probably get support for a pair of people to go.
what is the necessary items? This has been going on for a year and a half. There hasn't been anything necessary. What are these necessary?
I think it's just and I have to be careful because I can't talk about specifics, but I think it would be any trials, pre-trials, mediation that we would be allowed to sit in, not participate in.
And
We can choose not to do anything.
So where does the requirement, the necessity of having a board member there come from?
I don't think it's a requirement nor necessarily a necessity. I am not attending a single thing unless I have some support of the board. I want to be very transparent. They can ask me all day long, and I will say no. I apologize.
I wouldn't attend anything with
And
the support
I'm
of
not
the
trying
board.
to not do my job. I'm not trying to,
Right.
but that's what
so
it is.
you
what it is.
understand the danger of one person going alone, right?
I'm happy to bring a buddy. Believe me.
If there is no necessity, and we all agree that it's a giant liability, I don't know why we would want to go down that road.
Often the attorneys do ask for a board representative to be there to hear what's going on, so that if there is something that the attorneys talk about over here, the board member can take it back as a resolution to the board as a whole. So that, in my experience, I've had a number of cases since I've been doing this work, and the attorneys will ask for someone to attend, and this allows that person to attend if they wish to. Do they have to? No, but it allows it, and no one can say that they didn't have the authority of the board to sit in there and listen to what was going on.
So we could assign this to a third party and ask them to report back to the board.
I don't know that we can introduce a third party. I would have to ask that question. I don't have the answer.
I mean, if
I
it was,
think we already have one, right?
right, we
The
have,
attorney?
we have an attorney,
We
we
have an
have a
attorney.
superintendent. I don't, if there's something going to come to the board, it's going to come to the board. To have a board member decide if it's going to come to the board or not is a decision and is a violation of the OMA.
I disagree.
I don't think that
There's
it's,
case law on that.
I don't think that it's I think it's more of a, and I think all of us that have met probably in closed session with council can appreciate that there is sometimes, and no offense to any of our council or attorneys, but sometimes the way that our brains work, that don't spend every day in legal terms, it provides, I guess, a different mindset. Again, I don't care either way. I'm just being very transparent with the board.
I wanted to, I read this as it being a liaison from the board to bring things back, like you say, from how you interpret it, to report to the board as appropriate.
Correct, and there would be so full transparency, say, insurance company and council come together to say that something should be brought forward to the board. That's how it works. We
Right.
have a risk mitigate set seg.
So-
That would still be closed session, where we would have to debrief and do all of that. So it is just another mindset or viewpoint, but that would still have to occur. So I want to be very clear, that doesn't negate that process.
I wonder if it'd be appropriate to pass this and choose to go, just so we have the option to go with who should go in place, president or vice presidents in the president's absence, and then choose to go if you want to. But if the president or vice president did go, to Mr. Scott's concern, will there be any business conducted where you would make actions or decisions based on a yea or nay, a cough or a sneeze on the behalf of the board?
I mean,
Or
I
are
may-
you simply a liaison?
No. And I mean, I cough and sneeze up here, so hopefully no one's taking any consideration as to what my,
I'd like to read from the OMA handbook put together by Daniel Nessel in 2022. I think this is the most updated version. And it says, to deprive the full public body of the opportunity to consider a matter is an exercise of governmental authority which effectuates public policy and therefore subject to the OMA. And the citation is the case of, I'm going to butcher the name, Schmeideldicke versus Clare School Board. And in that case, they had a committee or a subcommittee who was evaluating something and made no recommendation to the board. And they were held in violation of the OMA because that person, that committee in that case, essentially decided not to make a recommendation to the board. And that was considered in itself a violation of the OMA, that the board should have had the opportunity to decide whether to take action on whatever they were investigating. So, I mean, I see a lot of parallels here, that we send someone into this and they may or may not come back to us with something to consider and have the liability of, if there's something they don't report back, we can't take action on, then that could be an OMA violation just as much as something they bring back that could be an action. Plus, they added a challenge of, again, having some action. I know for a fact, I guarantee you, these attorneys don't care about the individual in the room and their OMA violations. They care about getting this case rectified. And the personal liability of that person in the room, I think, is through the roof. It's not going to be me.
any further discussion?
I'll add, I think it's a little premature probably to have somebody go at this point. I think whoever it is, whether it's, and draw straws or what have you, I think as colleagues, I don't want to set any of you up for that kind of personal liability. I know we're all concerned about personal liability based on other conversations that have been had in the past. So again, I would ask that the board not put our president or our vice president in a precarious position.
And if there was a situation that is quote unquote necessary, quote unquote required, and it involves, I don't think anybody at this table is opposed to, calling a special meeting and being disrupted on a Friday night or Thursday, whatever, to make an important decision on whether someone actually has to go into one of these proceedings. But in that case, hopefully we would have a little more context about what was getting into, what were the possible decisions or not decisions to be made, and could give that individual a little more guidance or specific authority. The blanket authority really scares me.
I have a clarifying question. Megan, you mentioned that you weren't necessarily a participant in what went on, but you were there to watch. But the way this is worded, it says that you would participate in case proceedings as required. So it's kind of,
Patients is sitting there.
okay, so it was just to sit. So that's what's intended by what's written here.
Well, what would present be then if sitting is participating?
I'm sorry?
I guess I kind of agree with Vice President Coleman. Participating seems to be more than just sitting.
Yeah, agree. Listen,
So when you say
don't-
present,
I'm just
that
being
sounds
very-
like you're sitting to me.
Right.
I'm just
Participating seems like what we're doing
very
now.
clear that this, I can't.
Understood.
This document was created by our attorneys for this particular resolution. They do this all the time. They wouldn't have anything in here that was a violation of anything sitting in front of you today on what they normally do in the court cases that they handle. So again, our attorneys briefed on the situation, created this resolution to allow someone to be, to sit in and see what's happening.
And as I said, I don't think anybody's setting someone up for liability. I started this out with the mere presence can be misconstrued as a representation, a formal representation of the board. Not to get into specifics, as President Glaback said, but I believe her presence at this other event was misconstrued. And so that is a real danger.
All right, moving forward with item 2E for the resolution. Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Gogolewski? No. Mrs. Coleman?
I gotta say no.
Mr. Keller?
No.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
And I'm a no. You guys got me freaked out over here. 2, 5.
I again will reiterate that I
Motion
think
does not pass.
all 7 of us are willing to meet with short notice, a special meeting if needed to do what's
I want
necessary.
to make it very clear, we won't have any presence anywhere to do, sorry, with legal proceedings. Please show up at schools, but not legal proceedings.
So in all, in seriousness to the board, in full disclosure, if I'm invited to go to anything, I'm going because I'm on the lawsuit. And I want to hear what's being talked about, what's being thrown out there. So the board needs to know that Kate and I, as our names attached to this lawsuit, while you may not want one of you to be there, the fact is that we will be there to hear what's going on.
I think
Agreed.
that's expected. And again, I
Absolutely.
don't think it's that we don't want any of us to be there. We want all of us or none of us to be there to be compliant with Michigan law and our obligation to this
I think I
community.
would, though, I guess I'm asking the board, and I don't want to vote on this or anything, but if we come to a position where we need some type of representation, I think we just have to understand that it can't be all of us. And so as you guys are thinking of a future state, you might want to have in your head who might be a pair to go there and sit and represent the board. But again, I'm happy to bring that forward when the time comes. Just be prepared to take swift action because, again, no one's going without any support of the board. Item 3A, revised policies. Mr. Keller, do you want to take them one by one?
Yeah, we can do this again, but I'll try to keep it brief. I think if you want to look at 6110, I think Mr. Hughes highlighted some of the proposed additions. So page 1 in yellow, I have requested that the board add all conditions of acceptance shall be included in board materials. So it's the last sentence of the second paragraph, again in yellow on your packet. If you go down 2 paragraphs, talks about federal funds and as the usage by the district. I think kind of reading the political landscape in Washington, I felt that we should include a number 5. So there's 1 through 4 currently. The last would be 5, which talks about anything that would, promote race-based curriculum. I feel like that would, potentially put our district at risk for some of federal funds, the 2.2 million that we keep hearing about. So again, I'm advocating that we consider that,
Can I ask a question about that before you move on?
of course.
And I'm happy to dig into this, but I guess I'm just concerned that race-based is broad, because in American history, and I have a kid in world studies right now, I think that it's taught, but in the context of American history or world studies. And so I guess just wanting to clarify, are you requesting that that's being taken out of the curriculum? Some of that stuff that's already in there, that mostly in our social studies classes?
If I can just maybe answer for Greg here. Sorry. I don't think it's the mention of other races. I think it's the fact that there could be race-based curriculum such as CRT or whatever, where you get into identity politics and that sort of thing, where kids are being told that one group is good, one group is bad, that sort of thing. I don't think it's, the mention of any single group. History is history, but
I guess that's my concern, is it so broad that it covers that, and while we might have an understanding of it, does the next person?
yeah, and your point is valid. It's how clear this is written, and when we say race-based curriculum, maybe adding a little bit to that, such as race-based. This, I got to be real careful with this, but victimhood or oppression or something to that nature, where you don't have it finding fault or favoring one over the other.
Sorry, Mr. Keller.
Greg, am I
No, I think you have a
off?
valid concern or question, Megan. I guess, the word I tried to insert was promotion of, which was, I think, kind of what Mr. Goleski is speaking to, but I'd be happy to entertain some additional language to help quantify that, and whether that's through working with Mr. Minsker or somebody, Megan yourself, if you're wanting to do that. I'm open to suggestions on that.
I wish
Something
I had
like
neurons left today, but I don't for today, so I can think on that one.
Promotion of identity politics or something like that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Nope,
I just
nope,
wanted to,
it's
while the
good
question was
question.
hot.
No,
Why we're
it's
here.
good.
Keep in mind,
Good point.
the board should keep in mind, this policy is saying that there is legal precedence, there is law out there, legislation out there that says you can't use federal funds for X. So because this is not something that is in the law, what you would be putting in here or adding to this, which is not what is recommended, is something that there's not going to be a policing force that's going to say, oh, you use federal funds for this, and so therefore we're going to ding you for federal funds for next year. So just keep in mind that that's not what this is about. It's about the law saying you cannot use federal funds for these things.
But as a district, right, we can just, how we want to use it, right?
Are you having that written in there, though, because you think that those in place in the district curriculum are going to bring that into education?
I'm just, again, simply reading the tea leaves in Washington, and I think that they're going to say some of that stuff can't be in there, so
Mr. Campbell, I can tell you this.
it's not,
From our work with the DOJ, in them prescribing that we work with the Great Lakes Equity Center, which was nothing more than a bastion of CRT, that's the kind of scenario that I think we're talking about. Not that anyone here is going to secretly put it in or anything like that. Again, it's not the mistrust of the professionals in the room, it's the mistrust of those looking over our shoulder.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Can I give you all a little bit of perspective on this $2.2 million? We use it to feed kids and provide math intervention support at the middle school. And that's been pretty consistent for the past 10 years. So just keep that in mind.
any other questions on 6110 from anybody? All right. So 6111 just had the one addition, very first sentence of the first paragraph, had asked that we add some language that upon request of the Board of Education, we be provided those documents. I think my original request was just said provide to BOE upon request. I did not add proof to the BOE. Again, it was just, I think essentially reads the same way, but that wasn't my original request.
Greg, can I give you some context here?
Please do.
The proof of effective internal controls comes from your annual audit. That's your proof that the internal controls are functioning the way that they're designed. So having a sentence to provide proof to the Board of Education upon request, it's already there. I don't know if you need to have that sentence, just for some context.
Anybody else with questions on 6111?
So Rachel, what you just said is if the board said, hey, superintendent, provide us proof, I'd say, yeah, you have to wait until the audit's done, and the audit comes out in October, so your proof is in October of each year.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
So can I ask, learning as I go, on that then, do you, Mr. Keller, plan then to propose this on an action item as written then, or what is your feedback from that? Like what, for discussion item, what's the intent now moving forward? Like I can see where everything's going with the previous ones, you know, there's reason to have those as maybe an action item, but like that one in particular, is that like a done deal, or what are your thoughts on that? Just because I don't know, again, learning as I'm going, do you plan then just to keep that and then it's an action item next time, or what are the thoughts?
Well, I guess it's really not up to me to decide, but we have to make a decision as a board how we would want to move ahead. So I think per our usual cadence, if there's no suggested changes, then it would come forward at the next meeting as written, and we would vote on it. And if the majority of the board says, you know, we don't need this language based on feedback from our CFO, then that's, I think, what would happen. So my opinion, I think, is sort of irrelevant in terms of next steps.
I got you, I'm just learning. Yeah, like, is that a done deal now, or what's the feedback from your side? But I get it, it's just completely a learning as we go.
Okay, the next one, that was 6111, so now we're in 6325. And again, hopefully none of this is any surprises because it was shared in January. If you go to page 6 of 8, thank you, Mr. Hughes. In the section labeled procurement of recovered materials, there's sections A, B, and C. So if you read down in section C, I had requested that we add language that stated which essentially it was saying to the extent practical that you would try to use refurbish, reuse, recycled materials. And my concern as a member of the Health and Safety Committee is that I would want to put in some language that said, you know, as long as these reused, refurbished, recycled materials do not present a greater health risk than other market alternatives. And I think from a practical sense, we probably wouldn't do that anyways. And it even says to the greatest extent practical. So maybe there's some potential to capture what I'm after with that language. But again, you know, people change, move on. So to me, I wanted to try to make an effort to plainly cover what I believe to be the greatest extent practical.
Who's, is this assumed that whoever's leading that project makes that decision?
Yeah, it would obviously be our project team.
I mean, majority of the time it's Matt, obviously.
Right.
But is that, who's making the decision? That's all my question.
Yeah, it would be depending on the project, it would be Mr. Marino, and probably Rachel would be involved, Mr. Hughes would be involved.
Yeah, I think our biggest concern is, you know, recycled materials do not present a greater health risk than other market alternatives. So we do our research, we pick this product, and then the board member comes back and says, well, I read over here that this is this. We did the best decision we could make at the time based on board policy, but then it's not appropriate based on what the board sees. So what happens from there? So that's why we thought it was not necessary, because the sentence at the beginning says, to the greatest extent practical and consistent with the law, purchase reasonable equipment. So we're just concerned that who's going to determine whether or not it was the best market alternative if you don't trust that we did the best job we could to get the best market alternative?
But I think that same concern comes into play when you use practicable, right?
I think a perfect example, and Mr. Keller, you'll appreciate this, no one else on this board probably knows this even occurred, but you and I went back and forth with white papers on weight room flooring. This was probably 2 years ago. But we both found evidence, and so like, then who's making that ultimate decision, right? That's my concern. And I think you had some white papers, I had some white papers.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, Megan, obviously the board would, right? Because it's a high enough expenditure where we would then ultimately say yay or nay. So then if we decided to use that material, then the board is ultimately responsible. If it's under the threshold, then I guess it doesn't make its way to the board.
And the board of trust is that we did the best job we could if it was under the threshold? Just asking.
Any further questions for Mr. Keller on this? You're good.
Okay, so
That was
then I
it for
think
that
the
one,
last
right?
one, sorry, was bylaw 0166 agenda, and I know we just approved an updated policy on this, but I felt that, you know, there was some other items that I thought would be appropriate to add. And again, these were provided on January the 27th, so hopefully everybody had a chance to review that. I know many of you did reach out, so I thank you for those who did. I think a couple of the key takeaways from why I put this forth is that I wanted to include, you know, the language around supporting documents, not just providing an agenda. I think, you know, we get that by practice anyway, so again, it's sort of putting in writing what we already do. A nuance that is not currently in the policy today would say that it has to be electronically searchable. That's kind of been a pet peeve of mine, is when I try to go through these packets, you know, as a scanned document, I can't find things quickly, and it, you know, it might be 100 pages, you got to look through it, whereas there's enough, you know, if you want to type in Agenda 2A item, you got to scroll through and find it. So I would like the district to make things more searchable. I added some language in the third paragraph that as a board, I think we should get, you know, as part of our monthly superintendent report out that we get. I would like to see an actual report out of some of the key metrics, right? I know we do look at that. Now it's twice a year with the goals and objectives for Mr. Hughes, but I think I would rather see sort of a month-to-month update on those items. And, you know, some of these, like, for example, test scores, I do realize that we may not get test scores every month, but I think this would sort of serve as a check sheet or a dashboard for Mr. Hughes to kind of report back to us on the important things that, you know, the district, I'm quite confident he's probably looking at these already, but as a board, I think we need to get monthly report outs of those. And I think maybe the last key addition is towards the very bottom, is that I felt it was important for the community to make sure that we set a requirement to post the packet at least 2 days before the actual meeting, to give members of the community time to review that and then call the public or send an email, what have you, to ask questions. So I think that's kind of the spirit of all of the changes that I am asking for.
I have a few comments. One, if you have the fanciest version of Adobe, even scanned documents are searchable, which is the version that I have, and even documents that are scanned in a PDF is searchable. So
Did your workplace provide that for you, or did you buy it?
I realize not everyone has that ability to have that fancy version of Adobe, but it is out there. Like, these documents can be searchable, you know, depending on what
If it's-
level you.
Can I ask a dumb question? If it's sent, in that format, is it automatically searchable, or you have to have that individual license? Sorry if that's that question.
That's a good question. I don't know the
No,
answer
I
to that.
believe you'd have to have the license on the receiving end, yeah.
Right.
And then it has to be converted, scanned and converted. And even in that case, like happened this week, we got 2 separate PDFs. If you look at the other top districts in the
And
state.
I'll just finish too. I wasn't
Go
finished with
ahead.
my comments, but go ahead. You can finish.
No, go ahead.
My concern about this third paragraph, the superintendent shall, what if he doesn't have test scores, or what if there are no staff concerns? I just want to make sure that we're not setting up our superintendent to violate board policy if he doesn't have anything to report. You only have if applicable or available for test scores. What if there is nothing to talk about bond expenditures? I realize this is probably just a wish list, but if we're going to spell all of these out, the wish list could be, 50 items long about looking at some of the things Mr. Hughes has brought to the board under his superintendent report. I'm not sure using the word shall. I think it needs to be more if these items are applicable, if he has an update for us. Not to say that he's going to hit all of these each meeting.
Mr. Scott, sorry, you were next.
No, that's fine. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize. I just wanted to piggyback on Mr. Keller's comments on the electronically searchable agenda. I think this is one of my top priorities, and Mr. Hughes and I have had several conversations about it. I believe Mr. Hughes is currently in process of identifying various providers that could help us with that. There are 2, one of whom we already use, who assist districts in making their board documents much more user-friendly. I feel if you look at our website, they get more and more complicated every month, it seems. This month, we had 2 separate PDFs as a board package for some reason. Last month, there's 3 separate recordings. It just gets very convoluted and difficult as a board member to go back and review current and past stuff. So there are software packages that most districts are using now to organize their board documents, their meeting minutes, agendas, and not just current, but past as well, and make it much, much easier so we don't spend time trying to look through 2 separate packages and convert documents, et cetera.
Are you referring to board docs?
There's board docs, and what's the one we use now for our policies? Is that board docs?
No. Yeah, but it's, there's also another version of that, and I can't.
There's 2 providers. There's board docs and board something, board book. So board book is the one most of the top districts in the state have gone to. Board docs is our current provider for policy and offers an upgraded version which has agenda management. Now, I don't know if we're eligible for that because I think we're probably on some sort of Neola or MASB sub-license. But
I can bring some thoughts forward in item 3B as well as we talk about policy to get the board's feedback on, but I'll wait for that one.
I can tell you that Scott Usher's been looking at this, and it creates a lot of steps to have to go through, a lot of hoops that doesn't always work, that you spend a lot of time and frustration trying to do this work. And the real question really becomes, if somebody really wants a searchable document, there's a process that they can do, and that is to have some software to do so. But the real question is, do these really need to be searchable documents when you're putting them on the website for people to see? So,
yes.
So again, that's my 2 cents, but it's a very convoluted process, and it's not easy to do.
I think if you look at the top districts in the state and the top districts in the county, all of them do it. So I think it should be accomplishable.
Can we wait and talk about that item and item 3, because I think it flows into that.
Sure.
Any additional discussions or questions for Mr. Keller?
I have one. if I may. So if we have that 30,000-foot view, and I don't know what we would do, but, you know, enrollment, if in a 30-day period enrollment goes up or down, is that just for our own knowledge? You know, staff concerns, is that really our issue until it's brought to the board level? Personnel changes or vacancies, people come and go in a 30-day period, do we act, or is that just for our own information and then we do with it as we wish? I just don't know what we would do with it if some of these things came, like I can see like upcoming bond expenditures. To me, that's more of a board thing than enrollment in a 30-day period.
I think this kind of all, in my opinion, this plays into the strategic planning that we are getting ready to embark upon. So by having this data available, it's, you know, it tends to be like a leading indicator. It doesn't necessarily mean every month are you going to take action on something, but I think as a board, it tells us how we guide the district. Again, we're not the one, you know, necessarily doing the day-to-day, but at the end of the day, we're the ones setting the vision, you know, creating policy. And so if there are concerns, I think, you know, we need to have a way to know that there are concerns, right?
I don't want to wait for the entire school year to know a trend analysis in any one of these areas. I want to know where we're at. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to take action or we're going to institute some corrective action. No, it just simply gives us an indicator and a barometer of maybe where we have to beef up resources, or do we need to implement anything, or does this just simply, is this not even reflective of a milestone, or are we worrying too much? And then, you know, eventually, if some of these are working out to where they're not telling us anything, we can always change them.
I'm hearing a lot about, I guess what and pardon my operation brain, but I'm hearing a lot of like dashboarding. In my head, I go to like my operational dashboards of, it's much different than obviously the school, but I wonder too, if we connect this to the strategic plan so that our dashboard is reflective of the milestones in their strategic plan as well. Again, just thinking out loud, but. Because the strategic plan in theory are going to likely change our goals for next year, because it will be, they should be lock and step. And I just wonder if we create some structure around those items that are then part of that strategic plan in a more operational savvy format. Just my 2 cents.
And to the superintendent evaluation too, like, so we can have some formal benchmarking that's required by the superintendent evaluation. Right now it's kind of, you know, a little loose.
I think I do a pretty darn good job getting
Can we
the
stick?
information.
Can we stick?
I didn't, there's now, but that's being dictated by you and what you want to submit to the board, not a request from the board for certain information. So I'm not saying what you don't provide information, but what we're saying is maybe it should be more a formal request from the board on items that we request, in addition to the items that you want to share.
All right. Anything else on 3A? Moving on to 3B. Mr. Keller, I'm going to let you kick off this discussion, and then I'd like to insert some considerations into it.
All right, well, thanks, President Gleibach. I did ask for this discussion item to be added to the agenda. I appreciate it being included, and thank you for also, just for public transparency's sake, having our current policies in front of everyone for committee structures and committees. Don't necessarily have any language at this time to propose that we add, but wanted to have the discussion collectively with the team about kind of how do we envision policies, committees going forward. One of the things that I've sort of learned in checking with other local districts, some that, for example, use Neola, others that don't, but we're the only district that I found in Livingston County that doesn't currently have a policy committee. And I think, as, you know, there's some frustrations amongst the board on kind of, we saw a little bit of that tonight with, you know, various changes of, you know, maybe it's hard to follow. So I think one of the solutions to some of that may be to formally adopt a committee, or sorry, I keep saying committee, a policy committee that would receive the packet from Neola. We'd go through all the options. We decide as a board what we want to present for approval. And then ultimately, those are what we're basing our decisions upon. I think so that was kind of one of my biggest concerns. That, and I think in addition to the policy committee, just as opposed to adding one more committee, my proposal would be to replace the existing DEI committee with a policy committee, because again, I think that, you know, kind of reading the tea leaves in Washington, I don't think we're setting ourselves up to very well to have one. So this would allow us then to maintain the existing amount of committees today and replace that with what I think would be very helpful as a board. I mean, at the end of the day, right, we're tasked with setting policy, setting goals, setting the vision. And I think we've kind of outsourced that a little bit to the team, and I think that's really our job to do. So again, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today.
So I would recommend that we take them kind of in step. I think we need to define what the policy committee is first before we say we're going to replace it, because we'll probably need some direction as to what this executive order creates. So I don't want to cloud one to create another cloud and another. But my question to the board around this policy committee is, we do have options for policy delivery. So we use Neola and other districts in the county. Some of them use Thrune. I know of a district in the county that just transitioned from Neola to Thrune and really enjoyed Thrune's policies. Do you all want, collectively as a board, again, we don't need to vote, but I just want to get a feeling, a proposal to understand what that transition would look like from a cost perspective, outlining, it is a very large overhaul. It takes a lot of time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not like they take your policies and say, here's new ones. Like, there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. That would keep a policy committee busy for a very long period of time, but I just need to understand where everyone's head's at before Mr. Hughes goes down a rabbit hole of trying to give us quotes and comparisons for the two.
What would be the reason to switch?
I
mean,
think,
what's the justification for spending the money and the time and the years?
so if you guys would like an example, Brighton just did the switch, and you actually, their new board docs are on the website. Their old policies are still active on a different website. I can send you guys the links because they're still archived on a different website. I have gotten some feedback from the Brighton members and have read some policy that there's a little bit more meat to the bones. As opposed to like 30,000 foot view, it gives a little bit more meat. Again, I just need some direction from what the board would like to understand what that looks like.
If I can just propose an alternate, a neighboring district outside of Livingston County got rid of their committees altogether, completely. And what they did was they put together a plan to meet twice a month. And I'm not going there just yet with that. But instead of having committees, when we discuss policies, there's a lot of things that come up. And I think a committee just isn't the most practical, effective way to let everything come out. If we could, every other month, maybe, have nothing more than an open meeting where we're discussing policies, not making decisions, but giving our pros and cons. To do that, I think would be a better version than to just let a couple of people be in a committee, and then they bring that information over, and I don't think that's going to solve what we want to get done here.
So it's essentially a committee of the whole.
Yeah, yeah. It's all of us.
Right.
You know,
But I mean, so it's technically still a committee. I mean, or
Yeah.
it could be viewed that way.
Yeah.
You could set
But
it
I
up that way
th-
so that it's a committee of the whole and that meeting is a committee meeting to discuss policy. And then the alternate meeting in the month. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a different way to look. the
I
same
think
approach.
what they've done is just simply not call it a committee, just say, we're having a policy meeting.
Sure.
And then we're having, our general meeting and that, But,
Is it facilitate, do you mind sharing the districts so we can watch some of them?
yes, I believe it's Fenton.
I'm assuming they record their committee?
Yeah.
Or their open one?
I believe.
I can tell you our constituents would probably like that because we've spent a lot of tonight going over some of these minute details, and it would be nice to have these still be able to go over policy in an open format, recorded for everyone to be invited and come see. But the constituents that aren't the policy wonks who want to see the action items and those things can come to these meetings and not have to sit here for 4 hours. And to be honest, the way our agenda goes, some of this more important stuff is happening right now. And as you can see, not many people have stayed for it. So I think something like that in that direction is a good idea. I would say in combination with exploring alternatives to Neola and even beyond Thrun, because I believe there's several providers out there that do a little more thorough, personalized job rather than this, kind of take it or leave it.
On that respect, anyone who wants me to consider, or not me, but the board, so that we can do a cross comparison of companies, I need you to get me the company name by the end of the week, so then that we can do a cross comparison. So I know of Thrun, I know of Neola. I'm not as familiar with any others, so Mr. Scott, if there's others, I just need them by Friday.
Well, there's one I know that I don't want, so I won't send that one to you, but I will look for some that I do like. Do we have any idea what the Neola cost is right now?
What is it, Renee? About $1,200 update? About that? Yeah.
I know Thrun, I think, is a little pricier,
I'm sure.
and just hearing through the grapevine. I have not looked into any other items.
Was that a monthly charge, Chuck?
No,
Is
it's
it- or-
when they do updates, so when they do
Twice a year.
Okay.
twice a year, yes.
What about the website and the maintenance of
Oh.
that? Is that,
That's, so I think as part of, like, if you go and look at Brighton's old and Brighton's new, their new is on, I want to say, board docs, as part of a sub-license must be under Thrun, unless they did a whole transition.
I guess I was asking, sorry, in respect to the cost. I don't know, I'm sure we probably pay something either monthly or yearly to have them host all of our existing policies? Or is it just, you're saying that's free as long as we pay the,
No, I think
I
we
can't
pay
talk
them
to
a retainer, kind of like a retainer fee like we went through, but I don't know that it's a lot.
Yeah, I don't think it's very much. If, maybe $1,000 a year, maybe. I'd have to verify that, though.
But I'm happy to get the cross comparison to the board, just as we're discussing this, because it probably all jives together.
And these, if we do to go with a kind of committee of the whole type, we can really start, combining all of this together and just designating time at those. If we're having 6 meetings a year that are committee of the whole, we can maybe focus some on policy and some on building and site, some on finance.
Right. And there-
Obviously, policy will take the majority.
There may very well be the instance of where we have one policy that is absolutely critical to look at and review immediately, but if we just have that one policy and we just talk about that one item during a general board meeting, I don't think that's going to be impossible to deal with. But it would be nice to hear everyone's input on policies before we come to the board and before we vote on them, to get an idea of people's ideas, their thoughts. There may be things that I've missed that maybe Kristen thought of, and I want to know what the difference is and all that. I just think it would be a better communication tool for us to handle policies in that regard. I do. We come here, we roll our eyes, we're ticked that people are asking questions. No one wants that. No one wants to deal with that. No one wants to be here till 11 o'clock. And I think we need to find a better way to make it work.
Any questions? Again, my only ask is if you want to consider an alternate, just get it to me by Friday so that we can do a cross comparison.
So kind of looking ahead to next month, what does this particular discussion item look like from an action item next month? I think that's kind of where there's a little bit of ambiguity still for me. I mean, I appreciate everyone's opinions, but I guess I don't know if there was any, and I know we can't decide, or vote on anything today, but I'm just trying to understand if there's any sort of.
It's going to end up being, there needs to be a modification of policy. I'm just thinking out loud at this point. I don't know if Fenton has a policy that dictates their open committee. I'm not sure. And then there would have to be a motion to support that. So I want to be very clear, though, just so the board knows so that there's no surprises. Greg, you probably should just indicate if you're planning to bring that motion forward as an action item.
Sorry, that's what I was, I guess, trying to get at, because I think, like, with our current structure, right, this one, I think that's decided by the president, right? So I think it's not difficult to understand how we would assign people, but when we make changes to existing committees or add new ones, I think when we added the Health and Safety Committee, my understanding was there was a motion and the board ultimately voted. So I think for March, there would be a potential motion to add policy committee.
So perhaps you might want to take it in two motions, though. You might want to take it for the addition of the policy meeting and the addition, maybe Mr. Gogolewski brings forward then the secondary motion about open policy meetings every 2 months.
And would that replace our normal meeting, you're saying, or that's an addition to?
That would be in addition to.
In addition.
So the rest of the board, just so we're clear, you would bring forward your motion to support a policy committee. Mr. Gogolewski, you would then bring forward your motion to around the open committee, just so the public's clear, everyone on the conversation is clear. Is everyone comfortable with that?
So that will already be then in the packet as
If you,
to something, action item to,
yes, would you like to indicate what language you'd like? That'd be real helpful.
what language? Oh, motion language. Yeah, why don't I send something out?
So in
It seemed-
summary,
I
though,
think
your
it would-
motion will be relative to policy committee. Mr. Gogolewski, your motion will be relative to open policy committee, or open committee.
Yeah, that's it.
Sorry, probably just be pretty straightforward. I move to create a policy committee, something like that, so.
Yeah.
But I can send that to you.
I move to create a policy meeting every other month.
Okay. Just so that everyone is aware.
Yeah.
Awesome. Item 3C, administration contract rollovers. Mr. Hughes, I believe this is your item.
Yep, it's that time of year that we do roll contracts. And remember that this starts July 1st, so the new contract would be a 3-year contract, July 1st through 28. Again, it's to make sure that our administrators are shown that they're valued, and all mid-year evaluations are done. I've shared that the board can come in and view those anytime in my office, just make an appointment with me. Again, this is nothing new. Mr. Campbell, it might be new to you. The administrators listed below on the bottom portion have a new master agreement. So they unionized in the last year. They have an agreement, however, they still have to have individual contracts that go with that, just like the teachers have individual contracts. And then all the other administrators that aren't covered under that agreement are in Board Policy 1410. And then we would offer them an extension of their contract starting, July 1st of '25. So this just, again, shows our staff that we appreciate them, and at this point in time, I can assure you that I have no concerns with anybody that is on this list.
Board might ask, I have a lot of asks today, apparently, I'm sorry. But my ask with this is if you have concerns, want to review them, please schedule a meeting with Mr. Hughes to review them.
Not necessarily concerned, but just a question. So there was, I guess, some correspondence about a possibility of adding like a social media position. Would that position, where would that fall in either of these two contracts?
It wouldn't. That position would fall under 1410-01 when we're ready to present it to the board. So 1410 is the top group. The new administrative union is the bottom group, but they're also covered, they used to be covered under 1410. And then there's 1410-01, which is directors and department chairs and other people. So 1410-01 is where we'll put that when we bring it forward, when we're ready.
Thank you.
Item 3D, auditing services for discussion.
That would be Rachel.
Yep, so we recently issued an RFP for audit services. Our fee has grown pretty significantly over the last 2 years. I want to say it's been about a $20,000 increase over a 2-year period. So personally, not really feeling like we're getting $20,000 worth more of service for that fee. So it was time to look. We received a number of proposals. We reviewed those proposals in depth and met with a handful of the firms. And at this point, we're recommending that we move forward, starting with our June 30th, 2025 audit with Maynard Costerison. This wasn't an easy decision, I'll say. We have been with Plant Moran since the early 90s. I am a Plant Moran auditor myself, so this is a little personal for me too. So I didn't take this decision lightly, but considering I do strongly feel that Plant Moran is pretty much the gold standard when it comes to governmental auditing. But at the same time, I do feel like Maynard is going to be perfectly capable of handling what we need them to do. So that's the recommendation.
Quick question. Did you come up with these three just based upon your professional knowledge, or were some of these recommended by Thrun, or what?
No, we did a public RFP, so it was posted. Anyone could bid that wanted to. I did solicit bids from a handful of firms that I had some professional experience with and recommendations from, some of my colleagues. But it was a public RFP and anyone could bid.
So does that mean Plant Moran had the chance to rebid it?
Yes, and they did rebid it. We actually got 2 bids late, and theirs was one of them that was late. But considering that's who we currently had, and I knew it wasn't going to be a consideration.
They rebid it pretty much at the same rate?
Yes, actually, well, higher,
Higher?
Yeah. So,
So they're right now, they're at about 70, you said 75, is that what?
No, they were at about 63,000 for 2025.
Okay.
And this will be 47, so.
Well, I love the fact that we're proactive and getting these bids because you saw the need, so thank you for that. You mentioned Plant Moran is the gold standard. Are there any negative consequences you could think of when it comes to bonds or anything like that, that having a different auditor is going to affect?
No, because the rules are the same. right? The rules are the rules. The only negative I would see is just really getting somebody on board, getting them to get to know us and just the transition. It's never easy with anything that you're doing. But I don't see there being a negative. Plant Moran has the knowledge and they have the depth and they have the expertise. But I feel confident that Manor has that same knowledge and depth and expertise. There might just be fewer of them.
Yeah.
But still there.
They'll carry the weight. So people are going to look at that audit and be confident, just as they would with a Plant Moran audit.
Yes, I believe so.
And I know you mentioned some of the intricacies of our unique arrangements with LESA. You think there's a chance that the auditors assigned to the district could have other LESA districts?
They will be the same.
They will be the same.
They don't call them the partners at Manor. The principal is the person in charge, is the same, will be the same for our district as
Awesome.
is for LESA, as is for Brighton and Fowlerville.
Great.
Are they, this is a local firm then?
They're based out of Lansing.
Lansing, okay. So we're not looking to massive travel costs to send in auditors from, Albuquerque and,
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, they're pretty local.
All right.
Thank you.
If anyone wants any additional specifics or wants to dig with this, I'm going to send them your way, Rachel. Item 4A, future meetings, March 17th. If you guys don't wear green, we're going to have some issues. March 17th, right here at 6:30. Maybe we'll have some leprechauns show up. Item 4B, does anyone have any informational items they would like to share as part of this board meeting? Hearing none, we are adjourned.